down, make it 9, touchdown Notre Dame! Leonard has to dig deep right away.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
2nd and 5, play fake, Howard flips it, Smith's got it, and the freshman just waltzes in as the Buckeyes score to answer the Irish.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Judkins slips a tackle. Quinshon Judkins dives for the end zone, and Ohio State makes it 2 for 2 and takes the lead.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Judkins breaks free. Quinshon Judkins into sprint. And they'll finally run him down at the 5. An explosive play.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
Heavy pressure, Howard delivers downfield, and Smith, he's got it! Jeremiah Smith hadn't had a touch in the second half until that.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go on this Thursday. Hope you've had a really, really good day and a great night coming up for you as well. It is the last week of the NFL playoffs as far as who will play in New Orleans. Super Bowl 59. 59 in New Orleans. We will be there that week with coverage from NFL Media Headquarters and also Radio Row. So looking forward to that. Also, here we go with a lot of things, a couple of transfer portal notes, Notre Dame's offensive line, which is deep, with a couple of notes. But let's start with this one. Baylor can surely use help in the secondary. Paul Gonzalez, their new coach, they hired away from TCU. Ohio State transfer Calvin Simpson-Hunt is going to be at Baylor next season. He has 3 years of eligibility, former top 100 recruit in the 2023 class, redshirted his freshman year at Ohio State. Didn't play a lot last year, some special teams, and also not many snaps on defense. He will help bolster. I don't know. Of course, he didn't play a lot, but again, he was at Ohio State. Baylor gets Calvin Simpson-Hunt.
Yeah, I didn't even know who he was, to be quite honest with you, until I read about him today, because again, he didn't play that much at Ohio State, but they need DB, and he was a top 100 player in 2023, so maybe he just hasn't gotten to that point to live up to that. But this is one of those potential overperformance ads for Baylor. And hopefully the performance matches the potential eventually.
Well, I remember him because he was a big-time recruit out of the state of Texas and out of Waxahachie. And so I remember him being a 4-star rated guy and originally committed to Texas Tech and was with the Red Raiders at first. And then he flipped to Ohio State and signed with the Buckeyes in what was a kind of a pull the rug out from underneath Texas Tech move there at the end. So, he was bound to play in the Big 12 originally, and then got that Ohio State offer. Things changed there, and you can understand that, especially given right this second they're the national champions, you can understand the appeal of Ohio State. So, that was a loss for Tech, but not so much of a loss for Ohio State, seeing as how he didn't see the field all that much for them. Played a little bit sparingly this season, barely played anything on defense, so mostly special teams work, and obvious choice for him, I think, if he wants to play, to go out and get into the portal. So he did that, and Baylor is his choice, and that makes sense because of the previous relationships and having recruited him just a few years ago. So he's in the Big 12 now, like he was originally planning on being, just in Waco rather than in Lubbock, and he'll be back in the state of Texas as a Waxahachie kid, so I'm sure that'll be a nice little trip for the family. Just, what is that, an hour?
Waxahachie's, it's an hour. When I get to Waxahachie, I think
like
I'm an hour away.
Dallas a little bit. Starting to be on the precipice of the outskirts of DFW or Dallas proper. So he'll have a nice short trip home, and we'll see what he can do. Hopefully they can peel out some of that talent that clearly was there when he was rated originally and when people watched him in high school, and clearly what Ohio State and Texas Tech, among others, saw. So they need help in the secondary, as you said, and he'll have, I think, 3 seasons of eligibility remaining. So it's not one of those where you have to get it, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. You can kind of let this one brew a little bit, although I'm sure they want him to contribute as quickly as possible. So, a big-time prospect. Not so much a big-time player at this point, but we'll see what Dave Aranda and company can get out of him with these 3 years remaining.
So Baylor continues in the portal, and others. There are a lot of people who are signing. This one here, and by the way, Notre Dame played for the national championship. Unbelievable team. Had a great team. Ohio State was just better. But they had a very deep across the board at pretty much every position, including the offensive line. Pat Coogan has entered the portal, starting center for the Irish. Listen to the other name too, Garrett, if you don't mind. Another transfer is Rocco Spindler, a starting offensive lineman, has entered the portal. Now, Pete Sampson from theathletic.com does a great job covering Notre Dame. So he had a couple of comments on this. He goes, for how talented Notre Dame's offensive line room is, Pat Coogan's departure is a blow. If he'd returned, Coogan is probably a captain, whether he had started or not. And then Spindler battled through an ankle injury throughout the playoffs and the postseason, could be a starter at a high Power 4 program, ready-made guard for pretty much any program. So that's a couple of guys that, and it doesn't appear as if they're like starters, but they are. It's just part of being the depth. When you're good and deep like that, you can rotate along the offensive line.
Yeah, at first I thought, because there was another offensive lineman that they lost yesterday, but 2 today, I was like, man, 3 guys off the offensive line. But apparently this wasn't, Marcus Freeman wasn't, all that upset about it, because they've recruited so well along the front that it doesn't even matter that they're gone. I mean, it might, but they feel that they can withstand the losses, and they were prepared for it.
Yeah, I mean, if they're prepared for it, that's great. They're still pretty good players, though, that I think a lot of other teams will want to go after and probably already have over however much time's gone on since their announcement. Based on reactions to just Twitter posts, there's certainly fans that feel like they could help out their school, but I think coaches will too, because these aren't just guys who weren't playing. I mean, in some cases they may have lost their starting job, but they were still playing and have played quality snaps. So, it's great for Notre Dame that they're deep enough that this is just water off their back, I suppose, although there is some element of a loss here, as you point out there with talking to Pete Sampson. But, sounds like a couple of nice O-line prospects are now out there to shake up the transfer portal waters a little bit, and we'll see who goes and scoops those guys up. But certainly interesting to see that. But we were expecting some attrition from those 2 teams. They were the last ones to play, so you knew there was going to be some stragglers in terms of the transfer portal. And so here we see a couple from the Irish side of things. But I think this is sounds like it's good for both parties. Like, Notre Dame's still okay, and these 2 guys can go out and make some money or play, get more snaps somewhere else and play. So, we'll see where they land.
All right, and speaking of Notre Dame, last night the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year award down in Houston. Marcus Freeman won the award, the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year. What a year it was for Notre Dame. His 3rd year as the Irish head coach, playing for the national championship. There were a bunch, I think this year, and when we do our ballots based on Football Writers Association of America and a couple of others that we have, I think this year might have been the deepest list. There's always 2 or 3. But this year, I think this might have been the deepest list of who you could have easily walked away after voting for somebody as Coach of the Year and felt good about it.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have – nothing could have happened once I put my vote in after that for me to go, oh, now I forgot about this guy. Whether it's Signetti, Dillingham, Marcus Freeman, any of those guys.
National champion.
Yeah, Ryan Day. Ryan Day, you know what? He wasn't – they'll send you finalists. Ryan Day, on all the coaching lists I got, was not a finalist, because when they sent him out, Ryan Day was in his ho-hum, it's Ryan Day.
Well, it's an award for the regular season
so
that's voted on and then announced later
exactly.
on.
So, all that. So, Ryan Day didn't make the finalist list. He was always on the 10 to 12. He's always on that every year. He's been a head coach. He's been on that because he's got a stellar record. But he wasn't on any of the finalist lists we got, which is kind of funny that, the finalist list comes out, and then all of a sudden the best coach in the country is a guy who wasn't even on him.
I am very much, and this is my philosophy, you look at Spencer Danielson, you look at what Freeman did, or you look at even Kalani Sitake, Dillingham, Signetti. I am not one of those that just goes with the biggest surprise or the biggest turnaround. Sometimes the coach of the year might be a coach that's loaded and the expectations are stupid good, and you still meet them. That, in my opinion, is something to also take into consideration.
Well, I think this is one of those, if you voted after the season, it might be a different outcome, because if Ryan Day didn't prove he's the best coach in the country after all that, following the Michigan loss and everything that came with that, and just all that noise to then going on the run that they did, I think he'd probably have flipped some votes. But I'm not going to bog down on this. Marcus Freeman's certainly very deserving, and congratulations to him. He's got a very bright present and possibly an even brighter future. We'll see, but it certainly seems like it'll be very bright for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. And on the flip side, I'm sure that loss hurts a lot, but there's got to be a little slice of him as a Buckeye that's like, yes, a little fist pump that his alma mater wins another national championship, even though it's at his expense. But I think this is pretty clear a great choice, and beyond the fact that you vote prior to the postseason, because, like I said, if you vote after the postseason, like the Heisman, things could be a little bit different, but that's not the way it goes. All
right, Grant Teaff, we mentioned yesterday, was going to win or receive the Paul Bear Bryant Lifetime Achievement Award. This is from Lane Pittman. His daughter, the family was there, and then there's that group look at him, with all the coaches, including Marcus Freeman. Lane told Spencer Danielson, because Coach Teaff wanted to stand up and be a part of this, wanted to stand up. And, of course, right now he's a little bit, he's a little more fragile. And she said, and Kenny Dillingham and others, you all are in charge of making sure he stays up. And all the pressure on those coaches, with Grant Teaff right there in the middle, former Baylor head coach, Lifetime Achievement Award. That was a great night for everybody involved down in the great city of Houston.
Yeah, Coach looks great there. Still rocking the suit. Thrilled for him, and I know that his health hasn't been perfect over the last year and a half or so, but glad he could get there and get that award.
Yeah, congratulations to him and his family. Like we said yesterday, big time award and honoring, and glad they could all be there and celebrate that with him, and good for them, and congratulations to Coach Teaff.
All right, A.J. Stewart, remember him? He was at Baylor. He is headed to UCLA. That was announced. I think that was actually sometime late yesterday evening. There's another coaching note. A.J. Stewart, who was at Baylor, then not at Baylor, and now he is on the staff at UCLA. The Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award was official. Ashton Jeanty, we said this pretty much would be the favorite, but what a list that it was when you have Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who might be the number one pick in the draft, plus Bryson Daly and Kevin Jennings. That was official yesterday evening. He won the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award.
Yeah, as always, make it clear on this. It's not like the Heisman. It's just any player in America. It's based on guys with their ties to Texas, being from here, having gone to high school here. So Ashton, a military kid, moved around a little bit, but he did play his high school ball in Frisco and graduated from there. And so there's his tie-in. Shedeur, obviously, went to high school in Texas. Cam Ward, born and went to high school in Texas. Bryson Daly, same thing at Abernathy, and also Kevin Jennings. But, Ashton at Frisco Lone Star High School. And, for some people, I know that he was their Heisman Trophy choice. To me, this was a pretty easy choice when it came to this award. Cam Ward had a great year. Shedeur Sanders had a great year. Bryson Daly did as well as Kevin Jennings. But Ashton Jeanty was like that effing guy throughout most of this college football season, just in general. So I felt like this was a pretty easy choice for the voters, and this was what I expected. So congratulations to Ashton Jeanty, and man, he'll leave big shoes to fill there in Boise, Idaho.
When we vote every week, there's a vote, and then you have down to the semifinalists and all that. The only one I wish that could have been there, but you can't have everybody, would have been Taj Brooks at Tech. That was another name that was a part of the running. But the 5 they had were all spectacular players during the 2024 season.
I think Taj Brooks is a great player, and you might look back, depending on what he does in the NFL, and kind of hindsight's 2020. NFL career does not matter at all in college awards. Like, we can't retroactively award Patrick Mahomes the Heisman because he is really good in the NFL. Like, it doesn't work that way. But if he does go off and have a big NFL career, then maybe that'll cause some hindsight's 2020. Maybe he should have gotten more love type of thing. I think that's what was going to happen with Scatterbo until he had the big explosion at the end of the year, was people were just going to not even notice him, basically, outside of some circles. And then, here in a year to go, where did this guy come from? It's like, he was here the whole time. I think that might be the case with Taj Brooks because it didn't ever feel like he broke through the way that Scatterbo at least did in that Texas game. And then, really before that, in the Iowa State win in the Big 12 championship game, I know he made a lot of noise that Saturday, and that's kind of where it started to pipe up a lot. But, I think with Taj, he's a guy who's had an incredibly successful career individually. Team-wise, they've had some good success consistently in bowl games, winning a couple bowl games. Definitely a big part of building the future for Joey McGuire, but just – for whatever reason, kind of lost in the shuffle, I feel like, when it comes to accomplishments. And not even, like, getting disrespected. It's just like, hey, dude, like, Ashton Jeanty's really good, and, Shedeur Sanders is really good, and just there's a lot of talent that comes out of Texas with this particular award. But, yeah, he's a great player, and he'll get his flowers at some point. I know he certainly got them from the Red Raider faithful.
All right, Carter Yates, we've had him on. He writes for Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine. He put up his top 10 players – is, in his opinion, and also in the magazine's opinion, that they overlooked or they underrated based on how they performed during 2024. There's the list: Baylor, Sawyer Robertson, Jack Best, the wide receiver who unfortunately had the injury, put up huge numbers.
Yeah, that was nothing compared to losing his brother there in New Orleans.
I just forgot, absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, Wisner, the local young man from Connolly and then DeSoto High School, what a year he had. Forced into play. Kevin Jennings, who we had on yesterday. Then there's cornerback Zach Frazier. You see the list: Hagler, Sheffield, Matt Jones, Alfred Collins, who's another one of those UT defensive interior lineman beasts, and then Jacob Rodriguez as players they overlooked based on when they projected things in preseason teams and more. Carter Yates from Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine with that list that came out yesterday.
I'll speak to the 2 Baylor players first, and Sawyer Robertson and Matt Jones. Matt Jones was a bit of a disaster for a while. He was kind of a penalty waiting to happen. And then Dave Aranda, takes back over the defense. They kind of changed some things up. And not only, sometimes he still got those penalties and, went and laid somebody to waste, but he became kind of a controlled explosion a lot of times and was a big part of their defense. And for Sawyer Robertson, yeah, he's going to be number 1, but he was overlooked. I don't think it's his fault that they overlooked him. They brought in a quarterback to compete with him who initially won the job. He played through a bunch of injuries last year when he did have to play and didn't look all that great. And then he was finally healthy in a good position, and they rattled off all those wins in a row. So, yeah, yes, number 1 overlooked, although of all the people on the list you could overlook, I think there's some forgiveness for that. Jacob Rodriguez, by the way, from Tech, I would take him on any team, anytime,
I think that's
anywhere.
A big miss. That's a big miss on their part. Like, the other ones I think are pretty clearly, like, you can understand those. I think Jacob Rodriguez was kind of just a total whiff, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he came in with some weight behind him prior to the season. Like, Jack Besh didn't do anything the year prior. And I mentioned that about his brother. Like, y'all read that a few weeks ago. We didn't ever, I don't think, talk about that aspect of it because I just don't think we wanted to delve too far into the sadness of that story. But, man alive, I saw that and I felt so, and still feel so terrible for him and everyone else affected by that so directly. But, yeah, he had a hell of a season for TCU and big 1,000-yard guy. He had a bunch of touchdowns, and TCU is kind of a weird team that was just sort of there this season, and mostly everything's centering around their quarterback and what he was doing, whether he was turning the ball over or he was being like the very talented, kind of almost special version of himself that he could be at times, Josh Hoover. But I mean, if there's anybody else that was doing a lot and making noise, and it was certainly Jack Bech. So, yeah, he deserves to be on there. Trey Wisner, I mean, I don't think what he did was any surprise to us, just maybe the fact that some injuries led to him getting so much more playing time, and then he just was forcing himself into playing time there at the end. They still, spread it around a little bit, but yeah, he definitely made more of a mark than I think even Steve Sarkisian expected. So maybe he surprised us in the amount of snaps that he got, but like in terms of what he did, I don't think he surprised any of the three of us. Like we all know how good Trey Wisner is, but yeah, maybe he did more than you thought at the beginning of the year. And I mean, there's a lot of these other guys. DT Sheffield had a huge year. Matt Jones, I was very happy for him to close out his career the way that he did. Didn't end with a win, but ended with all the blood, sweat, and tears he could possibly manage out there on the field as a Bear over these past, 6 years. So cool to see him getting some honors there at the end of his career. And, I mean, you mentioned with Sawyer Robertson. I don't blame anybody for missing him. He wasn't expected to be the starting quarterback.
One of the problems that Jones also had to deal with is he followed a guy named Terrell Bernard on a defense that was incredible in 2021. He was a part of that team, and then he was next man up as far as playing. He had some tackles even that year of 2021, but then he had to follow two All-Americans in Bernard and also in Jalen Petrie. Colorado, this is a minor NCAA violation. I don't remember when this was done, but I guess it was, and that's fine. And when Juju Lewis was mentioned by Dion during a weekly coaches show, you can't do that. You can't mention an incoming player or a prospect or even somebody that's committed to you until they have signed officially. So they get a recruiting violation. I don't know. Maybe they'll have one off-campus visit they can't have. But Dion and Colorado were hit with that.
Yeah.
Now, you think with all
there's
the
going to be
things,
some clickbait with this story.
My God. He doesn't I'm telling you right now, I
Massive violation.
I love the way he runs his program. I really do. He has impressed me more and more and more. But you're right. He said, you think of all the things you could do now that would even be erased at some point.
Well, eventually it's probably going to have to, because so you can even here's the thing. The kid can put up a picture of you and him and be like, hey, thanks, Coach Prime. Great to meet you on my visit to Boulder. And then he can retweet it and be like, you're a great young man. And then on his television show, he can't be like, yeah, he was here. I mean, no. What are we talking about here?
I know.
Semantics.
Yeah, I'm afraid with Dion that there's going to probably be like some just very misleading clickbait titles with Dion, massive violations, rock Colorado football type stuff. Like, I'm just anticipating that because that's typically what you see, especially Dion-related stuff just gets so magnified because of who he is. But, yeah, really not that big of a deal. Not a big deal. And so they got popped for that, and they'll deal with it and move on, and nothing will change whatsoever other than maybe they just – on the next meeting, you're like, hey, by the way, we got to make sure we don't do that again. But beyond that, like, moving on, and it's a blip on the radar.
We have a ton of guests today, and a lot of them that do cover college football in different ways, including Chris Hummer, who also had the story about the commitment from Ohio State to Baylor. But Sam Kahn, Max Olson, Matt Brown, we haven't had him on in a long time. News and notes that he learned over the last couple of weeks from the AFCA convention, national championship weekend, and also so much more. Plus Mickey Spagnola, as the Cowboys are trying to percolate maybe a decision on their head coach. Paul's top five and Craig's off the radar too.
Speaking of Dion, so that was what a lead-in. So Dion's the next Cowboys head coach, right?
Hold on.
No, do we need to get some more college football notes before we let Paul start ranting here?
No, please don't do it now. We got to hit people.
So we'll set him up then.
Don't look like Dan Quinn.
All right, since he's not going to set him up, I'll set it up. Reports indicate today that the Dallas Cowboys are closing in on making their next head coaching hire following the departure of Mike McCarthy. I was already forgetting his name. And apparently the Cowboys are zeroing in on Brian Schottenheimer as their next head football coach, according to Clarence Hill Jr. of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. So there you go. All the names that were out there. Brian Schottenheimer appears to be the guy. And I can tell you, having listened to about 5 minutes of the ticket in Dallas on my way here, because I'd seen the headline, I was like, let's see what they're saying in DFW. So I went there on my app, and Might as well have been a funeral, guys. I mean, it might as well have been a funeral on Dallas Cowboys radio, basically. Even turned over to the flagship, which we all like those guys quite a bit, but I think we could say the fan is very friendly to Dallas.
Not with this.
Not with it. Well, let me finish.
The fan. I mean,
they are the fan, but they are also the Dallas Cowboys flagship, so they are more friendly than, let's say, the ticket has to be. And so even those guys were roasting this decision and just at a loss, and quite frankly on both sides of that coin, sounding like they were at rock bottom as Dallas Cowboys media and as in some of their cases Dallas Cowboys fans. So with our trusty Cowboys fan in here, Paul Catalina, there was rumors about Dion, there's other names that were brought up. Brian Schottenheimer, what are your thoughts?
Give us some new content here. Get the fresh stuff. There you go.
10th Mountain Whiskey is the official whiskey of Paul Catalina dealing with this problem.
You're not going to do that on the air. You are just a bad human being.
No, listen, here's the thing. Just a little. Just a nip. Just a nip.
Just a nip.
Just a nip today. So thank you to our client, 10th Mountain Whiskey. I think this is the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. Brian Schottenheimer is not a young coach who the rest of the league is ready to pop on like Ben Johnson. He's been in the league for a long time. No one has ever brought this up. I mean, there are reports out there this is the Stephen Jones guy. So if you were hoping that when Jerry dies that things will get better, no, they'll get worse because Stephen Jones, in my opinion, I've said this before, I kind of feel like he's not letting Jerry be full Jerry, and I think that that's a shame because everybody should be able to be the full and most powerful version of themselves. This is a terrible idea. This is a placeholder. This is Wade Phillips all over again. Jason Witten will eventually be the head coach because he will be placed on this staff. And this organization is not serious about winning, and because they are just such a money-making machine, they'll never feel it enough to where they have to make real changes. And to that,
there you go. They won 12 games 3 consecutive years. There's a lot of franchises that would love to have done that. They just never finished. They couldn't finish.
There is a little bit of a tie-in because he actually started off his college days as a Kansas Jayhawk. Mm-hmm. So there's a tie-in with the Big 12 and with your lovely bride. And then, of course, there was the other part of that where he then transferred and he finished at Florida. So he was a Florida State fan.
This is the problem you have with him.
Really love that.
You know what? When he was at Florida, the thing I remember most about Brian Schottenheimer was he was the quarterback who was standing next to Spurrier. So he was a coach on the roster. Look, I'm not saying he doesn't know football. I'm just saying when you're trying to win Super Bowls, you need to have somebody who's done that at any level before, and he's not. And he would always stand there right next to Spurrier. He caught a lot of stray visors, I know, in the day. But yeah, no, he was. I remember him. He sat there. He was the 4th string headset guy. He knew a lot. Spurrier's offense was innovative, so he started out in a good spot.
Man, he'll be able to get some great advice on being successful in the NFL from Spurrier. Oh wait, no, never mind.
Had the great run in Washington. Yeah.
But it is an in-house hire. He was their OC the past couple years, and
who called how many plays?
I mean 0. But title under the title of offensive coordinator the past couple seasons was an analyst with Dallas. Starting in 2022. So he's been with Dallas now for 3 years, and they go in-house to hire Brian Schottenheimer. According to reports, it's not official. Yeah. And you know what? I know there's a lot of Cowboys fans out there right now hoping that it's not ever going to be official by the sounds of it, that someone swoops in and magically changes the plans. But that's where it's looking right now like they're going to go is Brian Schottenheimer.
I listened to part of the morning show, and I remember about 4 or 5 or 6 days ago, one of the co-hosts, Sean Sharif, started to say he doesn't really put much up on Twitter about reporting things. He has opinions, but he said, man, I'm telling you, this is hotter than you think, and maybe if they don't make a decision anytime soon, then you get into the weekend where the games are going to take over. Jerry's going to want full throttle attention. You don't want to do it on Friday when it's a news dump day, although maybe that's what they want to do. And then if you don't do it on Saturday or Sunday or Monday, then you wait till Tuesday because Monday's about all the championship games. So this will be interesting. And are they waiting to see if Philadelphia and what happens with them to try to get back in touch again with another meeting with Kellen Moore, who we know is also someone very much involved.
I'd rather have that than
I was going to ask you who you'd rather have, him or Kellen Moore, or him or Dion, or him or Robert Saleh, or any other number of names.
He would be my absolute last choice of anybody who's even been mentioned.
Schottenheimer.
Leslie Frazier.
Yeah.
All of them, okay.
All of them. I mean, who is knocking down the door to hire him to their staff?
Well, the worst part about this is that Mike McCarthy was somebody that people got tired of, like they did with Dan Quinn. They got tired of him, and now he's in a championship game. That doesn't help. And then Kellen Moore's in the championship game. They got tired of him. And I think Kellen Moore wanted to go, not literally fly his wings with the Eagles, but wanted to get away and maybe do something different with somebody else. So this is a very intriguing, as if, in my opinion, Mike McCarthy, they thought they were just going to tell him what to do and move on with him. And he said, no, I don't want to do it this way anymore. And now hopefully he gets a job, and the Cowboys are looking for their coach.
Oh, he's going to get a job. I just don't know if he'll be his head coach right away. But Mike McCarthy's not going to have a problem getting a job. He can make a cushy analyst gig for a year and then be back as head coach.
Yeah, he can do it. Yeah, absolutely.
He's going to be totally fine, and he'll probably have the best year of his life that he's had in quite some time, quite honestly. But I think this is obviously a major disappointment for most people. And you thought when they moved on from McCarthy, which seemed very sudden, honestly, because it kind of felt like they just decided, like, he's coming back. And then here you go with all of a sudden it's, nope, he's actually moving on, and they're going to start this search. I just gave them the benefit of the doubt that they'd had something in store. Like, they'd already talked to Kellen Moore and kind of decided, like, so, yeah, they could possibly be waiting for him this weekend, but don't you have kind of an idea right now already whether or not Kellen Moore would be the guy and whether or not Kellen Moore would be interested? You're not really waiting until after this weekend. And if he was the guy and was interested and you were interested in him, you're not having this float out there necessarily.
Nobody else interviewed him.
Yeah,
like,
so
he could have been
this
interviewed.
This is a total shock.
Yeah,
this was out of complete nowhere, except for in Dallas.
And
so
maybe it works. I don't know.
You know that. Hey, the part about that is if you're an Eagles fan, Kellen Moore maybe sticks around a while longer, and certainly he's had some success there. And him and Saquon have been a very fun pairing. But the best news, if this is in fact what happens, is that Deion's staying in Boulder, which we kind of already figured that. But from a college football standpoint, to bring it back to that into the Big 12, that is great news for Brett Yormark and for everyone at Colorado and for the players there who signed up to play for him. If he is in fact staying put as it appears, and kind of was already leaning that way anyways, just to have it official, though, is a big deal so they can start the hype machine for next year and get that going.
I heard the discussion Twitter, and Ed Werder's great. He covers the NFL, one of the best ever at what he does, too, among others. But is this going to give the fan base a surge, an adrenaline rush? We heard last year the crowds in Oxnard were lower than ever before as there was kind of this worn-out factor. We'll see. He is not yet official. There's still a long way to go. We'll hear what Mickey has to say. I think Mickey's probably on board with it, but we'll have him today at 5:30.
Yeah, I mean, they're worn out because they said all in. They spent $18 million in free agency, which is the lowest by far of anybody. They didn't make any kind of changes on the roster. They set Mike McCarthy up to fail because of that. And
they paid a bucket load of money to guys that they had to pay, though, right?
Yeah, but they already had those guys. Like, they didn't do anything to help anybody else out. They just said, okay, here's more money for you guys.
I would say they could have had twice as much money in free agency. Had they moved on CD and Dak earlier, they would have had more. They could have moved it around a little bit, as you said. We waited till the last second like they wanted to because they wanted to have everyone talking about it. And then basically they didn't have anything.
And I'm not saying go spend like Jaguars $100 million over the cap, but I mean, everything they say is just a thing, and they don't really care.
Yeah. I wonder if they actually, while they're meeting, they're like, okay, what's the best day to release this for us to get the biggest impact one way or the other? All right, when we come back, Sam Kahn, Max Olson, Chris Hummer, Off the Radar, Matt Brown, Mickey Spagnola, Top 5. Thank you for watching us wherever you are. YouTube, the channel, 365 Sports. On Twitter, at 365 Sports YT, and the Sikkim 365 app. This is 365 Sports.
It's pleasant. It's different than any other dentist office. I really feel like they care. And it's not that you're here for 2 hours waiting on someone to take care of you. It's quick and easy, and I bring my kids, and my kids love being here too. They really love the treasure box. Staff is really nice and accommodating, real friendly. You feel more like home. It's not sterile looking. Everybody has their own personalized rooms with decorations and decor, and they'll even have a blanket for you when it's cold. I've recommended people to actually come here, and they are patients now. I really love it here. It feels like family.
Another so-so pizza from So-So's Pizza? But wait, there's Marco's! Our new triple pepperoni Magnifico pizza is stacked with classic, crispy cupped, and new bold shredded pepperoni. It's triple the flavor, and only at Marco's. Just $11.99.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow @GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student-athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
Looking for the best selection of new and pre-owned cars in Central Texas? Look no further than Allen Samuels in Waco. From trucks to family SUVs, we've got it all at Allen Samuels in Waco, your friend in the car business.
Come by, let's be friends.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com. There he is, always with us most every Thursday, back and forth a few days during the season as what he has to write and cover too. Sam, thank you for being a part of the show today. The season's over. It's been over since late Monday night, but there's still kind of some summary reflections or whatever. What stood out to you the most, and I know there might have been 20 things, about just what you saw, what we saw from the first ever 12-game playoff?
First off, it was a lot of fun. And I mentioned this when I got back from the Cotton Bowl in the semifinal, which was my last game because I was following Texas all the way through until they got eliminated. But I mentioned to a few people when I got back of how much I really enjoyed covering this playoff. It was so unique in that we got a home game in the first round for several teams. Then you had the bowl games, but they're different stakes because it was no longer just 4 teams involved. It was, I got to see Arizona State, and I got to see Cam Scatteraboo in person. And after watching him all year long on TV and from afar, and he had one of my 3 Heisman votes. He was on my ballot, and I never felt more validated than I did after that game against Texas, watching him fight through and watching that team fight through. And you really learned a lot about them. You learned a lot about all these other teams that we don't really see. And I just love that it invoked every part of the country. Every region of the country was represented, as opposed to just having the championship chase concentrated just either 1 or 2 parts of the country. And so I thought it was a smashing success. Obviously, it's not perfect. There's things you can tweak and things you can do to make it better. But overall, I liked what we ended up with. I thought the 2 teams that made the final were very deserving. And I think at the end of the day, we got the best team at the end that won it.
Sam, what do you think about the immediate futures for both of them as you go into next year? Do you think that there will be more rebuilding or reloading?
I think for Ohio State, I look back and they're going to lose a lot of their guys. And I was looking through their list the other day, and they actually bring back a little bit more than I realized. They Caleb Downs, of course, is going to be back. Carnell Tate should be back. Jeremiah Smith should be back. They're going to lose Howard and the running backs, and Denzel Burke and all those other guys, both edge rushers who are really, really good. But I think they have a chance to still be decent. I was feeling pretty good about Notre Dame until I saw those two offensive linemen hit the portal. That one kind of got me scratching my head a little bit, because with as much as they had coming back on the line, with Love and Jadarian Price coming back, with Jaden Greathouse back, and just the schedule that I was looking at their schedule, it's not super daunting next year. I looked at them as a team that could possibly make another run back to the playoff, but certainly something to watch for them with the offensive line, and how is Steve Angeli going to end up turning out as the quarterback if he ends up being the guy, or is it going to be CJ Carr? So I'm fascinated to watch that battle. Obviously, at Ohio State, you wonder if it's going to be Julian Sayin. I think that's what we probably expect to happen. So fascinating to see how he steps in. The fact that they did not take a big-time veteran transfer quarterback in the portal tells us, I think, that they feel really good about where they are at that position. So I don't think either of these teams are slam dunks necessarily to get back to the semis or to the championship, but I think they'll still both be good teams that should very much be contenders for the 12 team next year.
Sam, I'm not trying to make too much of it, but there has been this storyline surrounding the conferences, especially this year with all the realignment and the playoff and all that comes with that. I guess, do you feel like there's an actual shift occurring here with the Big Ten winning back-to-back and all of that? I don't think the SEC's going anywhere. Nobody probably does, but does it feel like a shift, or does it feel like just kind of a moment where, hey, the Big Ten happened to win a couple in a row?
Yeah, I struggle to say definitively that it's a huge shift, because when we see the draft happen in 3 months, we know where the conference is going to produce the most players, and even the most players per capita. It's going to be the SEC. And so that's not going to change. But I will say the SEC was the conference where you are most likely to build a super team. Ohio State is one of the few exceptions to that, where they were able to build one. And I think the era of the super team is going away. And as the era of the super team goes away, then it makes it that much harder for everybody, including those at the top of the SEC. And, oh, by the way, you start looking through these SEC schedules, and I was looking through this the last couple of days, nobody's schedule is easy anymore, because there were some times where if you were in the SEC East, your conference schedule was maybe not that daunting. Plus, your non-conference schedule was kind of weak. If you're in the SEC West, you had a juggernaut to go through, but maybe it was a couple of down. Maybe Auburn was down and Arkansas was down, and maybe you could, escape with only a couple, two or three tough, really, really tough games when I'm talking about championship level teams. Now, with a 16-team conference, and you added one of those teams as a bona fide power now, and another is only a few years removed from being one, it's really going to be hard to be a dominant team coming out of that conference, I think, on a consistent basis. I don't think everybody's ever going to have the type of run that Alabama did under Saban in the SEC for the foreseeable future, just with all the variables that we have from the portal, from NIL, and the roster movement that goes on, plus how big and thick and deep the conference is. I think it's just going to be really hard to have a real dominant power. So when you don't have that dominant power, then you're going to have teams that are a little bit more vulnerable coming in, that are going to have a few more flaws coming into the playoff, and that's going to make it harder to make it all the way through. So I don't want to say that the SEC is down by any stretch, but I do think it's going to cause a little bit of a reevaluation from everybody outside the SEC of, hey, let's just not automatically give them favored nation status because they haven't had a team in the title game in the last 2 years. That there is at least a little bit of something that we can say, okay, let's look closer at each one of these things, which we should be doing anyway. We should be looking at these resumes, not by conference, but by individual team. What is on your resume? What have you done? Who have you beaten? How good are you really? Not how good of a conference did you come from?
With the fact that 12 teams got in, and there were games, some that were more wide open as far as margin, then there were some that were just classics. Even if, like, the Texas-Ohio State game was a 14-point margin, it was still, my God, right there at the doorstep to be tied. What team that didn't get in do you think, based on what you saw and remember, may have been able to make a dent?
Well, they weren't going to be close to getting in because I think they were a little bit too far off the radar at this point in the rankings. But South Carolina is a team that toward the end of the year that I thought was playing some really good ball, and that if you had to go up against them and Lenore Sellers and some of some of the fast, freakish dudes they have on the roster, I think they would have caused some problems in the bracket. I think Shane Beamer's doing a great job there, and I think the roster talent, the way he's acquired guys, and the way they've recruited, I think has been really good, and the development seems to be there. They're bringing Lenora Sellers back, obviously, but they're going to have a lot to replace, so I don't know if they're going to quite get there. I wasn't really as big on the Ole Miss train. To me, they had too many clunkers for my taste that they should have taken care of. But I think South Carolina was a team that if I would have picked another, and then I'll give you one more, and it's a team, and I know you guys have talked about it, but everybody just seemed to forget about them. That I think they were a good team. I don't know if they would have gone deep in the bracket, but I think they would have had a shot to win a game. Is BYU. I thought BYU was a really good team. They were a really good defensive team. They could run the football. I think Jake Retzloff was a gamer. I think they would have been fascinating to watch in the playoff, but it seems like after the Kansas loss, everybody just forgot about him, even though their resume isn't really that much different from SMU's. And, oh, by the way, they beat SMU head-to-head. But I think they would have been interesting to see in the bracket as well.
Sam, I want to go back to something you said about looking more at the teams, like who you beat, all these different things, not what conference you're from or all that. Is this why we need, how do you get lobbying out of this thing? Because that's the key. It's look, it doesn't, the 12 people on that committee is 12, right? Or however many it is. But the people in the room, that jury is the one who decides what goes and who goes. And they don't really, because of what their process is supposed to be of watching film, discussing among themselves, what Greg Sankey or anyone else says, Brett Yormark, anybody, shouldn't matter because that's all just noise, right? So how do they, because they are human, how do you get that out of the equation?
I don't think you ever will, because the easiest way to do it is the way they're not going to go, is give every conference champion a bid. Give and I mean all 10 conferences. Give every single conference champion a bid, and then however many at-larges you want to put in there, go for it. And then you can lobby about the at-larges. But if they want to solidify and guarantee, I'm not in favor of this, but if they want to guarantee the 4 power conferences one bid, or maybe even 2 bids, and then leave one for the best group of 5, I think that would take some of the lobbying out, because if you're guaranteeing, the more you guarantee spots that you can't, if you guarantee you have a clear qualification, so it's just like the NFL playoffs, you have a certain metric, or you have a certain level to reach, and if you reach it, then you're in, and if you don't, then you're not, or you're subjected to the at-large process. It's as simple as that. And I don't understand why that's such a radical thing with college football. I understand the sport is different, and it's so large, and it's hard to, you can't get everybody to play everybody because it's just, there's too many teams to do it. But I don't understand why it's so radical and why we can do this in the FCS, but why we can't do it in the FBS. It boggles my mind.
Sam, it appears the Dallas Cowboys have found their next head coach in Brian Schottenheimer. Nothing official, so, there could obviously be a curveball somewhere, but if that is in fact the case, that means Deion Sanders is likely staying put in Boulder, Colorado. I know it's kind of already sort of pointing that way, but now it feels like we can start sort of talking about what does year 3 look like in your opinion with the turnover of Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, and just obviously massive news for Colorado if this is the case.
Yeah, no doubt. Certainly a lot of us, we would have placed wagers 2 years ago on whether or not Deion would have been the coach of Colorado in 2025, I think a lot of us would have been losing that bet right now, because I certainly would have placed money on the fact that he'd be done as soon as his sons were done. So that would be huge for them, because, look, whatever you want to say about his bravado and his personality, the guy has done a good job in terms of turning that program around and making them relevant again. I mean, they were in the hunt for a Big 12 title last year, and that's way more than any of us, I think, would have predicted. Even the most optimistic people, I thought, pegged them at maybe a 7 or 8 win team. And so to be in the conversation for a Big 12 title game berth at the end, I think was a massive step forward. It's not going to be as easy, obviously, because I think Shedeur and Travis, this was not a team that solely relied on just those two, because they've got a lot of other really good skill talent. I think of guys like Will Shepard. I think of guys like Preston Hodge and some of these dudes that they got in the portal. Those were not just the only 2 guys, but they were a big chunk of the success of that team. And so replicating that's going to be hard. Getting the quarterback recruit from 25, Juju Lewis, I think that's going to be huge for them. I'm fascinated to see, is he going to play? Or I think they took Caden Salter in the portal from Liberty, so I assume he's going to be your bridge guy. So you get a veteran who I don't think is nearly going to be at the level Shedeur is. I think Caden Salter's a good player, not an elite player in the way that Shedeur is, in my opinion. But certainly in the Big 12, I think good enough that he's going to be able to make some plays and help them bridge that gap until they get to Juju in 2026. So I think they're going to be a fun team, a fascinating team, and they're going to continue to be aggressive as they can in the portal. And I'll be interested to see how they fare as we move into the ref share era, if they're able to still be as aggressive and does Deion's name and brand and image and all that stuff still work for them in the same way. I don't have a reason to believe that it won't, but I'll be curious to see if it still works in that way.
That East-West Shrine game up in Arlington coming up on the 30th has a nice Colorado flavor. Shedeur, I think Wester among some of the others, even a couple of 2 or 3 defensive players. Couple of questions from the chat. Arizona State was obviously, out of all the 12 teams, in Indiana maybe. Boise, not a surprise. We knew from the beginning that they could be one of the favorites in the G5. But those 2 teams were, of the 12, I think, the biggest and nicest surprises. Do you see somebody simmering? Because if we say that we do, then they're not a surprise. Like South Carolina was almost a part of that too. Anybody on your radar for that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say a surprise, but out of the G5 ranks, because they were in it this year, I was really interested in what UNLV has done in the portal so far under Dan Mullen. They did lose a lot, but I think they've taken a lot of good players as well, so I'm curious to them. The other one that has lost a lot, but they're a good program. They have been a winning program now for the last 3 years consistently, and I really love their coach is Tulane. I think John Summerall is a star. I know they lost Mensah, and I know they lost the running back as well, and that's going to be really hard to recover from. But they I think, have had a really good, strong, consistent run of success here, and it would not shock me if they end up being the Group of 5 team that comes out of this at the end of the day. They took the Ball State transfer Caden Samanza out of the portal as their quarterback that's going to end up filling in for Mensah now that he's gone. So I think they're going to be a team that I'm going to look at. As far as the power conference teams, the one that made the playoff that was a surprise to us that we didn't expect at the end of this thing was Clemson. I have a feeling that maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I think Clemson has a real shot to make the playoff next year as an at-large or a conference champion and make a deep run, because I love the Tom Allen hire at defensive coordinator. You get Cade Klubnik, who's now a multi-year starter with the same offensive coordinator for multi-years. I think they've done a pretty good. They're starting to utilize the portal a little bit. They got a few impact guys, about 2 or 3 impact guys that they added to the roster. So that one is interesting. And then the other 2 that I would put, and I don't think they're huge surprises, but I think they're teams to watch that didn't make the playoff this year, LSU and Illinois. I think Bielema, I've always respected Bielema, and I've always thought he's a really good coach. I like what he obviously says Wisconsin. He had it going a little bit at Arkansas before it tailed off, but you have to respect the job he's done so far at Illinois. They bring a lot back. And then LSU, I think, is loaded, and they went all in on the portal this year. I'm a huge Garrett Nussmeier fan. I watching him in person, I think he's got all the tools that you want, and I think he'll end up being one of the top guys in the 2026 draft. So getting him back is going to be huge, and they went heavy in the portal to supplement that roster. So wouldn't shock me at all to see LSU jumping in the mix here.
Got one more question, and then I'm going to email you a question on a topic that I think we'll talk more about at 4:45 with Craig's Off the Radar from somebody in the chat, if you wouldn't mind responding to that when you get it. Avery Johnson. This guy's got the it factor, although they had to kind of grind through it. What is the ceiling, you think, with Avery Johnson's expectations at K-State next season?
I think it's still really high. I would still, as long as they have him, I think you still have to consider that team a Big 12 title contender. I know he had ups and downs last year, but it was really his first season as the guy, the full-time guy, unquestioned. Obviously, now that Will Howard was gone. And look, I think we have sometimes we get these outsized expectations for guys when guys step into these new roles and think that they're going to be perfect. I think we may suffer the same thing with Arch Manning next year when he steps into Texas. I think we're going to think that he's going to go in there and throw for 4,000 yards and win the Heisman Trophy. And his start against Ohio State on September 30th or August 30th is going to be his third career start. So I think it's easy to assume that quarterbacks are going to be like Tua or Trevor Lawrence and have that immediate success. But I think he's still a really talented player with a really high ceiling. He's obviously got to get better about taking care of the football. That was the biggest bugaboo for Avery, but I think that's something that's fixable. I don't think that's something that's inherent in you and that you can't get rid of. I think he's going to be aggressive. He's really confident in his talent. He's obviously a dynamic athlete. And as long as he's got that athleticism to build upon, the throwing lanes are going to be there. He's just got to be smart about it. It's just going to take more time, more coaching, more development. I think he'll be just fine. I think I'm excited to see how he does in his second year as the guy.
Hey, man, great to see you. Appreciate it, Sam. Sam Kahn, theathletic.com. I'll send you an email on a question that I think we'll have as a topic at 4:45 and get his feedback on that as well. For those of you in the chat, I've mentioned this a little bit. Thank you for the questions. Good stuff. We appreciate it. If we have the time, if we can, we'll get to some of them. And we tried to ask most of them, if not all of them, except the one we'll hold for about an hour from now. Thank you very much for being a part of the chat and listening to the segment we had with Sam Kahn. Coming up around the corner, Max Olson. He is the transfer portal guru. And of course, it never stops, even if the doors are closed, because they're never closed. So he will join us today. Do you have the picture of the Kansas Stadium, Garrett? I want to close it out with that as one more college football note. That is a look as they continue with that renovation and also just facelift of the stadium. The seating reimagined, David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium after last year playing in the city of Kansas City.
Yeah, when I was there last year for the game at the Fog, it was that. I mean, it wasn't close to that yet. They had knocked it down, and it was funny because I kind of had this when I looked at when we were driving in, like I looked at like the Google Maps to kind of, the pictures to get like what is the, landmarks. Well, the picture I had in my head was just when I had looked and the stadium was there. So you're like driving up on the highway and all you can see is cranes. And I was like, oh, I think that's where it was. Cause like once you get kind of past the bend, you can see the rest of it. But yeah, that's going to be really beautiful. It's better for them than playing in a soccer stadium or Arrowhead for sure. And it's something that their football program has needed for quite a long time.
Yeah, that looks incredible. That'll be a great spot. And, I would like to watch a game there. I like the big K there in the end zone. And the rock chalk and just all that looks really nice and pops off the screen. So, I think that'll definitely take Kansas football to another level here with Lance Leipold. And I'm glad that they were able to kind of save some face there at the end of the year. Don't know what this offseason would have been like had they just continued down the path they were on of – the losses piling up and all of that. By the end, you had a little bit of optimism of like, oh, Jaden Daniels is healthy now. Oh, that's what that looks like again. And you flirted with even making a bowl game, and like it was just kind of out of nowhere the way they flipped it around. And it was good to see that, and that'll be a great home stadium for them. So that looks great.
You would put that back up, Garrett. I want to see if I noticed something on this in the stadium.
You've been there for a football game, right?
No, I have been. Yeah, I did. No track. They haven't run track there, I think, in about 10 years or so, but I wondered about that because it just makes it so much more cozy. It makes it so much more viewer and fan, ticket holder friendly. I have. I was there, and it was a lot larger stadium. It was a big.
You know what also does for track? It makes it feel like you're not running alone.
No,
I mean, you go and they'll say, like, when A&M had track at Kyle Field, I remember one time when I was in high school, we had gone to visit, and my dad goes, hey, they're having a track meet at A&M. You want to go? And I went, and it felt like it was a private showing where we were sitting. And so, and then you put it in there. I mean, them taking that out, of course, adding 100,000 seats or whatever they did there, I mean, it's made the place that's already loud ridiculously louder, but that's what Kansas needs. It's going to be pretty awesome.
It's like less of a high school stadium.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It looks like it's just new, the amenities, and so thank you, Garrett, for putting that back up. It looks beautiful for Lance Leipold and also KU football. Around the corner, Max Olson.
Who would have thought in the midst of the Les Miles era and even the Charlie Weiss, do you call that era? But just the low point that program was at just a few years ago, and now where they are with a really good football coach and a nice upgraded stadium and some good players. I think there's a lot to like now, and it's just a long ways from where they were just a few years ago, so that's great to see.
It is, and look forward, and I did cover a game there. That's when I had that fractured thigh, and it was on crutches, and it was not easy. All right, when we come back, Max Olson, also Chris Hummer, a lot to get to. This is 365 Sports. The Baylor Athletics fan engagement, Paul Thorpe and Doug Furch, Baylor Athletics fan engagement staff responsible for the marketing and promotions of all 19 varsity sports. Sometimes, and like most athletic departments, a tremendous amount of focus on what's going on during football weeks, home games, tailgating, and even alumni gatherings. But also the other sports too. Committed in conjunction with what are the mission statements they have at Baylor Athletics, created a positive and engaging environment for the fans and students alike, and also making sure wherever you are in the country watching us, because we do have a coast-to-coast audience. If you have something that's happening, let's just say in Chicago, something that is happening in New Orleans, something and you're a Baylor alum that is happening somewhere, let's say in Denver, and you would like to get it out, you should let the folks at the Baylor Athletics fan engagement know about it. Paul Thorpe, Doug Furch, a perfect elite in-venue experience if you want to come into town and watch something, or where you are to watch something as a party. It's the Baylor Athletics fan engagement.
Cars priced right both day and night. Average your car in Texas. Trucks built for you, red, white, and blue. Average your car in Texas. Cars that zoom with lots of room. Average your car in Texas. Count on us, a dealer to trust. Average your car in Waco, Texas.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Let Camille Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Petty Clinic Men's Healthcare in Woodway is now proud to offer you men an exceptional weight management body sculpting product called semaglutide, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. Semaglutide is an FDA-approved weight management medication. Once-a-week injections of this powerful medication offers an average body fat weight loss of 20% within the first year of treatment. In addition to body sculpting, semaglutide also normalizes blood sugars and has the clinical research proof of reducing blood pressure, cholesterol, stroke, and heart attack risk. If you're like most men and you have stubborn fat that will just not respond to typical diets and exercise, then help is finally here. Semaglutide, affordable, highly effective. Google search Petty Clinic Waco and reach out to the Petty Clinic team today for a free consultation with Dr. Petty to see if semaglutide is right for you. Go to pettycliniclowt.com.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Michelob Ultra. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Containing only 95 calories and 2.6 carbs.
365 Sports will take you up till sometime, either right at 6 or right after 6 o'clock today. David Smoak and Paul Catalina. Craig Smoak also today. Garrett Ross is running the mothership. And Emery Winter is here, back from his weekend of debauchery in Denver over the weekend. We're now joined by Max Olson from ESPN. Max, an interesting day today when it comes to the portal. We'll get to the Notre Dame offensive lineman, but Baylor also coming up with a young man who was recruited by Tech and then, of course, Ohio State, and Calvin Simpson-Hunt. Didn't play a lot, but appears to be a nice little pickup for the new cornerbacks coach in Paul Gonzalez.
Yeah, that's right. Appreciate you letting me on. Yeah, I think those are the kind of pickups that, I probably get a little bit underrated because they happen after the window. And I'm sure that, if Calvin Simpson-Hunt had put his name in the portal on December 9th, I think he would have probably had a lot of good opportunities because he's still just a redshirt freshman with 3 more years of eligibility. He's a former top 150 recruit or 100, depending on the site you're looking at. And he goes in late because of the championship run by Ohio State. And so, I think at Baylor and really, across the Big 12, I think those are the kind of players you want to bet on and try to win on in the portal. It is the kind of player you can bring home who's got a bunch of years of eligibility and has a chance to develop into a starter and a really good player. So, yeah, I like that move for Baylor. And, I think even though the portal window's been closed, I think you're still going to see names pop up here as we get the last of the Ohio State and Notre Dame players going in, and then grad transfers can keep popping up between now and the end of April.
Max, what is the portal situation now? Like, what do you watch for now that, it's like, oh, well, Notre Dame and Ohio State have guys that can go? Like, what do you keep your eye on at this point?
I think fingers crossed it's kind of slowing down now, and I think now you're kind of getting to the point where the dust is starting to settle a little bit, and you can kind of take a much clearer look at who are the programs that added the most and got better, and who lost the most. And I think by my count, like more than 75% of the players in the portal, the scholarship FBS players in the portal, have made decisions now. So not a lot of guys still out there who are like kind of big name proven guys. And so, as those players enroll and get to campus and all that kind of stuff, things kind of finally quiet down and you got kind of a better sense of, who really thrived during this period. And I think if guys do pop up here in the weeks ahead, there will still be demand because there's still going to be schools that have positional needs and stuff like that. But right now it's kind of finally settling down.
So a couple of weeks ago, the AFCA got together for their convention, and the coaches ended up pushing forward the idea of wanting to move to a single portal window in early January, like a 10-day window. And it's just a recommendation. Obviously, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. But obviously, Max, people are looking for answers, especially coaches, on how to kind of corral this a little bit. What do you make of that proposal or that idea? Does it really change things all that much in your mind? And as somebody who follows it as closely as you do you have any personal ideas that you've had over this time of how the portal could probably operate a little bit better, if at all?
Yeah, I think there's a couple problems. The first problem, obviously, is that, the NCAA's current record in courtrooms is it's not good, right? And it's like, you can just tell, like, as you see kind of more reform coming, it's like someone's going to sue and challenge this, and there's going to be an injunction, and there's going to be a rule change. Like, we just keep kind of seeing that over the last few years. So I think the idea of, like, I certainly understand from a head coach perspective, yeah, you would not want there to be a spring window. The NFL doesn't have 2 free agency periods. Like, you wish this could all be done at one time, and you feel like you have a really good grasp of who's going to be on your team next year and not lose guys all over again. I certainly understand, like, that frustration. But I think taking away the second window is something they could have done in this cycle and ultimately chose not to do. I think they know that would be there probably would be problems and litigation if they tried to do that. I think it's just we're at that point now where if you kind of try to take these things that you've given them away, you're going to have people that challenge that. And so I think that's a tough thing. And then the other, like the idea of just pushing the portal to January, like, believe me, it would make my life easier. But I think the problem is it's just not like a single issue here. Like this stuff is all interconnected and all tangled up together. And so, the fact that the national championship game is on January 20th, I think is a big problem for this stuff. I think the fact that, that the postseason is going to stretch as long as it does, and maybe longer if they expand it someday, I think that all factors into this. And so I understand we all want to see players playing bowl games and all that kind of stuff. But I still think if you're doing the portal in January, players are still going to be announcing in November and December that they're going to go in the portal, and they're still going to be opting out and things like that. So I think it's all part of the bigger problem of the calendar. And, can you start playing the season earlier, and can you start getting to the postseason earlier? And I think it's all connected to this. Just say, let's move the portal. I don't think that really solves a lot of problems.
I was wondering today as I saw, maybe, Paul, you said there was a player yesterday from the offensive line at Notre Dame, 2 more today. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? And then I realized, like you said, those 2 teams played Monday night. So is Notre Dame that deep on the offensive line? I saw Pete Sampson write a couple of things about those guys entering the portal. These are some dudes that can play, and now all of a sudden available for others to pick up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the depth for 25 is it takes a hit, certainly. You can say, I mean, certainly these guys were starters for Notre Dame. And so, and that offensive line, wasn't perfect this year, but was good enough to get them all the way to the end. So, I think that you can say, all right, there's some younger guys that step up and players that return and stuff like that. And so you can get through these losses. But I think that's, it cuts into the depth, and now you're hoping for some young guys to really step up, and they had that this year at left tackle and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's a tough hit, and one where Notre Dame is, I think they've got a good track record, obviously, when it comes to high school talent on the offensive line and recruiting and developing stuff like that. So they'll probably be okay. But those are players that probably, based on where they're coming from, probably are going to make a good payday by choosing to grad transfer somewhere else. And that's another challenge here. At this time of year, you play the championship game this late. There's just not there aren't 3 great offensive linemen in the portal for Notre Dame to go get that are just equivalent players. And so you either have a need in the spring or you got to hope some more grad transfers pop up here.
I know you're so busy with reporting and following the portal and all these various things, but just Max Olson, the college football reporter, Max Olson, the college football fan, what did you think of the first ever 12-team playoff?
Terrific. I mean, I really, I think overall, like you can't talk about it without talking about just like the overall 24 season. And I think it was as exciting as I think we hoped. I know that there was a lot of fear mongering going in about just how this 12-team playoff is going to ruin the regular season and the stakes and all that stuff. To me, it didn't feel that way. And I don't think that Ohio State, as an 8 seed winning the national championship, means that this thing was all messed up. I think you have to have the utmost respect for the caliber of opponents that Ohio State had to beat in the playoffs, the number of top 5 teams they had to take down to go all the way. And so it's going to be a little bit different now. You have to, we're going to have to get used to the fact that there are going to be teams that go 10-2 that are good enough to win it all and stuff like that. But I thought the playoff itself was a ton of fun. I got to go to Atlanta for Texas Arizona State, and certainly that was one of the games of the year. And I thought that the semifinals delivered in a big way, and I enjoyed the national championship. I thought Notre Dame made that competitive, obviously, in the second half. But how could you not be impressed by what Ryan Day and his team did and overcoming what they overcame in the postseason? So I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty pleased overall. I think it made the overall season a lot more exciting for a lot more fan bases.
Yeah, I think that none of the changes that need to be made compared to the size of expanding it would be catastrophically major. I think a minor tweak is the seeding, but you have to get that worked out money-wise because the teams that would get kind of pushed out there would be the ones that, made some money from getting a bye that normally wouldn't because the big boys would keep them out. More home games I think that's going to come. And then what do you do with the bowl games? How do you I guess for lack of a better term, how do you mercy kill the stupid things that we have to do with these bowl games, Max? Because it's just kind of antiquated, especially to what it is now.
I definitely know what you mean. And I think, I didn't get to cover a first-round home game this year, but they look like terrific experiences. I don't know if that's what every single fan is looking for. I know some people like to make the trips and stuff, but man, I think that a second round of home games would be a lot of fun. And I think that especially when you think about like what that would mean for a Boise State to get to host one of those, and for Arizona State and these teams that had the first round buys this year. So yeah, I think and certainly makes a difference if you're Oregon and you're having to play such a tough matchup in your first playoff game, something like that. So yeah, I think that would be pretty cool to see how that works out and the politics of it and satisfying all of the parties involved there. Don't have the magic bullet for that. But I'm with you. I think that, and it certainly seemed like it was a little bit challenging to explain to the public each week during the rankings reveals. Okay, here's the rankings, but this is what the bracket actually would look like. And I could see, and then obviously all of the teams that had buys lost their games, right? So like I can understand the argument for going to, just seeding at 1 to 12. But you're right. I just don't think, and you talk to other commissioners, they kind of anticipated like no one's just going to kind of give that up for free without anything in return. And so to not be able to get that done, it's hard to get that done when and make that unanimous when there's not mutual benefit for everybody. But I agree, it's little tweaks. I don't think you look at this and say the 12 was a disaster or that this playoff needs to be much larger.
Max, question about the portal, and I know you got to go. Thank you for your time as always. Is that
of course?
So Micah Hudson, the 5-star receiver, goes to Tech. Not much out of him this year. Next thing you know, he's in the portal, and then apparently A&M. And then yesterday there were some, and a great friend of mine who's a Tech alum said that Mike is back in Lubbock, and I get a note from somebody within the program that he might have been back in there to pick up his stuff he left to take it back to College Station. What are you hearing about him?
I think that one's pretty up in the air right now. I wouldn't be surprised if Micah Hudson takes a little break here and gets his head together and kind of figures out what he wants to do. I don't think it's impossible that he could return to Texas Tech. Now I think I don't think that's like easy because like obviously that's a player that left your program and is everybody in the locker room going to be cool with that? And like they've got Caleb Douglas back, they added Reggie Virgil. Like it's not like Micah Hudson comes back and is instantly a starter for them next year. Like I think he'd have to re-earn some trust if he were to go back. But I don't think it's impossible that he could go back there. I know Joey McGuire and his staff did not want to lose him. And I don't think that it was like a matter of money. The reason that he went to Texas A&M, I think he was just in a place in his head where he kind of felt like he needed a change after a freshman season that didn't go the way he hoped. And then after a brief stint at A&M, it seems like he's kind of reconsidering here. But yeah, he's not. It's definitely an unusual situation. I mean, we see it sometimes, but it's an unusual situation, and one where we'll see if he just needs a little leave of absence and he's back with the Aggies, or if he's truly going back to Tech or going back in the portal.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time. Get a little break. You deserve it, although you never do, because the portal is never over. It's never ending. It's never closed in a lot of different ways. Max Olson with us from ESPN on a little bit at the end with Micah Hudson, and also the story of the transfers in the portal today, making decisions. All right, when we come back, Chris Hummer, 247 CBS Sports, his thoughts about Baylor and who they picked up and other stories in the portal and his reflection on the 2024 college football season. Craig's off the radar. And also, we have Paul's top 5 to close out the show. In between all that, yes, more guests, including Matt Brown. Can't wait to hear from Matt from Extra Points. Yep.
I just got notes here from, let's see, it looks like On 3 that it's kind of out of nowhere, but former Tennessee guard Cameron Carr has committed to Baylor and enrolled for the second semester.
As a walk-on.
So, yeah, former top 60 recruit, sophomore, That just seems kind of random timing and all of that. But, yeah, he's joining the Bears for the second semester, coming over from Tennessee.
I don't think he will play available because he had something going on with his thumb. He wanted a red shirt, and I don't know if that means he's available, but they sure as hell could use his body, but I don't think he's going to play.
Grit says in a statement, he said, after a lot of prayer and discussion, blah, 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 I decided to pursue a fresh start. Nothing but love for Coach Barnes, blah, blah, blah. For my next step, I've enrolled as a student at Baylor. I'm taking the proper steps to hopefully join the basketball program as a walk-on for the remainder of the season with the intent of becoming eligible to compete during the 25-26 season.
There you go. Okay, good. All right, they need bodies, man. I was at the game last night. That's another segment for later. They need human beings who can play, and we'll talk about VJ Edgecombe and more later in the show today. All right, this is 365 Sports. Thank you. If you don't mind, hit the like and subscribe button. Back in a moment, Chris Hummer, he's next. Don Shumador and Coffee Beans in the Town West Shopping Center, Valley Mills, in between Richland Drive and Valley Mills. They're in the Town West Shopping Center, and they have a beautiful place. If you, let's say you're old school and you smoke a pipe. My youngest brother, Philip, he'll smoke cigars. He's got that beautiful place on the East Coast in Florida, but he'll kind of go grandfather on me and pull out a pipe, and loves them. And they have the ability for you if you want. There's a story about a couple in Dallas that came down to Waco hearing me endorse Don Shumador, and they had a pipe that was kind of a little rugged. Something wasn't working quite right. Maybe just needed to get cleaned up a little bit. They did, and then they not only got that fixed, but they got a new one, too, a pipe. Plus, if you want fresh coffee beans, VitaDreams, a CBD product you could take at night if you want to help you maybe relax a little bit more, calm your brain down, and you fall asleep a little bit earlier. Imagine every morning if you could wake up with an extra 30 minutes to an hour of sleep rather than tossing and turning. And, yes, the 48-foot walk-in humidor with all of the great brands of cigars with Cheyenne and Joshua. Tell them I sent you. Don Shumador and Coffee Beans in the Town West Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Pioneer Steel and Pipe opened their doors in 1943, and they have never wavered with their focus on great product and customer service, relationships with a handshake, making sure you, the customer, is satisfied. Their new facility is now twice the size, allowing new inventory, higher quantities, and in a much more organized fashion. In addition to the long lengths in tubing, angles, channels, rods, and flat, Pioneer Steel and Pipe now offers several shorter, more convenient lengths of material already cut. Their 2,500 square foot showroom has over 1,000 new products in stock, new welding supplies, hardware, quickcrete, and do-it-yourself components for any project, whether you are a professional contractor or weekend warrior. The new facility is designed to make your loading experience faster and more efficient with easy drive lanes around the building and much more room to get your trailer loaded. Our location may have changed, but our values haven't, and our relationship with customers goes much farther than just business. Pioneer Steel and Pipe on Loop 340 and Highway 6 and just east of I-35 in Waco.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
365 Sports, we appreciate your time. And we will hear in just a moment Chris Hummer from 247 Sports and also CBS and his thoughts about the 2024 college football season. We'll have that for you in a moment. One other note in college we did not get to during the opening headlines and all of that is Bill Belichick. There was a lot of news about had not signed his contract. He has, and 29 pages. His buyout, if in fact he was to leave before this summer, would be $10 million. If In fact, he was to leave after June 1st, 2025. It's $1 million. Brett McMurphy and national writers around the country with that. Paul, why would it drop?
Well, I think
I would think June 1st, 2026.
Once they get past June 1st, 2025, and it's essentially, I mean, there's not going to be any NFL hires after then. If there are, it's because something bad happened, right? Somebody has a health problem or whatever. I guess that's why. I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but, whatever. So
that's it. Everyone was wondering about it, whether he's signed a contract. Wait a minute. If he's not signed with somebody else like Brady in the Vegas or anyone else, maybe Jerry all of a sudden just does one of those late night swoop in and figure that out. I could never see a Belichick working for Jerry, but also never thought Parcells would do it. But Parcells' ego was large enough where he was going to do it the way he wanted to do it anyway. And I remember when that story came down about 3 days after Dave Campbell was fired. After 5-11, 5-11, and 5-11. So there's the story about Bill Belichick. He's under the contract, and that's now official.
Yeah, I don't know, like the 9, but Michael Lombardi has made a big statement about like he's not going anywhere. He wouldn't have done this, and I don't think Bill Belichick is real willy-nilly about his professional decisions. So I think he's in there, but I don't think this is a long-term thing anyway either, though, right?
He's 72 years old.
Exactly.
How could it possibly be long-term? He's not going to coach for a decade, and if he does, then by God, he's going to be one of the healthier guys in their late 70s, certainly, because it's going to be a grind, man, which he's obviously up for. But, yeah, I mean, this isn't a 10-year plan here for North Carolina. This is like, let's get what the hell we can in the next 2 to 5 years, and hopefully we get a Big Ten invite or something. I mean, that's what this is. Let's create some noise around our football program. I think anything you get beyond like 2 to 5 years, you're probably just extremely grateful for.
It is. Listen, we have been kind of treading water. Mac had some good ups and downs. They eventually fired him, which sucked, but it was time to move on. Let's rejuice this program and set it up for the future. You're right. If it gets 2 to 3, 4 years out of it, it would be great. Chris Hummer, 247 Sports and CBS Sports, joins us on the show. Chris, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. So a little news today, a few news and notes in the transfer portal. Can you tell us much about Calvin Simpson-Hunt? From Ohio State, was recruited, committed to Tech, ended up at Ohio State, and now part of Baylor secondary.
Yeah, I mean, first thing I'd say is he's from Waxahachie, Texas, my hometown. So shout out to the Indians. But he was a really talented player. He was a high 4-star recruit out of high school, top 100 guy. He was one of the fastest players in the country, really. He's recorded multiple sub 10, 7, 100-meter times. He's somebody that couldn't break through in a really deep Ohio State backfield the last couple of years, or defensive back room. But when you talk about raw clay, he is as good as it gets in the country at that position. And I think especially in the Big 12, he'll be very successful. He immediately brings speed, plays the ball well, and Dave Aranda has a good track record with DBs. So I think it's a really nice pickup. The Bears have done a really nice job in the portal this cycle.
Who do you think, now that the dust is mostly settled and there's not really any big gigantic, I mean, there's going to be a couple of the Notre Dame linemen, and I know some other people might pop up. Who do you think's team is at least the most you can tell definitely improved, because the portal is a very, very inexact science?
There's no question about that. You're talking about nationally, I assume?
Yeah.
I think LSU has had the best portal class. I don't think there was an area that LSU had a hole in that it didn't get better at. They had probably the best center in the transfer portal, coming over from Virginia Tech and Braylon Moore. They got maybe the best interior lineman in the transfer portal, and Josh Thompson from Northwestern. 2 of the best receivers, a couple impact corners, an impact tight end, and Donovan Green, if he's healthy, coming over from Texas A&M. In addition to Bauer Sharp coming over from Oklahoma at that room. So they got better there. Basically, if there was a hole around Garrett Nussmeier, it improved. I haven't even mentioned the edge takes they had. They had Patrick Payton, the number one edge player in the portal for us in our rankings, coming over from Florida State. Jack Pyburn coming over from Florida, who's a multi-year starter from them. Somebody who defends the run really well. LSU had to get better this offseason under Brian Kelly, and I think they made a concerted effort in a way we haven't seen before in attacking the portal, and I think it really paid off.
Chris, one of the other moves that just kind of stood out to me, I guess, as this started to trickle down, but post-national championships, Devin Brown heading over to Cal. They obviously lost their very good quarterback to the portal themselves, but any thoughts as the clarity hits that Ohio State crowded quarterback room?
Yeah, Julian Sand's going to be their guy. It would be a shock if it wasn't moving forward. I think the majority of kids in that room have kind of understood that and where that was going. Lincoln Kienholz is still there and will compete this spring, but it'd be a surprise if it wasn't Julian Sand's job heading into 2025. And if you're Devin Brown, somebody who's a former, I think like a top 50 recruit for us back in the day, started one game in his career. It was an unfortunate start for him. It was in a bowl game. He got hurt basically immediately. But he's somebody that Ohio State thought highly of. He was the backup for Kyle McCord and Will Howard the last 2 years. And if you're Cal, like, you had to get a guy. You lost Fernando Mendoza to the portal, a really underrated quarterback nationally, somebody that NFL scouts view as a potential NFL player, looking towards, I guess, the 2026 draft at this point. And they got a West Coast kid to come home, and they also added a quarterback from Oregon, a high 4-star recruit from the 2025 class who immediately entered the portal. So Cal's quarterback room certainly saw a talent upgrade, and I think Devin Brown will be really good for them next year.
We talk a lot about players, but coaches too, staffs change, people move on somewhere because the staff they were on was fired. But the reaction when Baylor was able to get Paul Gonzalez, the cornerbacks coach at TCU, to come, 65 to 80 miles south, was in some ways like, what? Because he'd been there so long. And a great pickup for them from all indications. 2 high school coaches in the area that were on the TCU staff that went to that deep run. Joe Gillespie and also Josh Creech were like, they didn't know. And they were really surprised that Baylor was able to get Paul Gonzalez. What are you hearing about how important that pickup might be, and the fact they got a commitment today who's a corner?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Paul Gonzalez is a really well-respected coach in Texas. Obviously, has been at TCU for a long time, preceding Sonny Dykes' time there, dating back to his time with Gary Patterson. And like, anytime you can snatch an important part of a staff away from a rival, it's a pretty big win. And you saw Baylor do that with Paul Gonzalez. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for TCU moving forward and for Baylor. But I think it's a really nice pickup for the Bears. Paul Gonzalez has obviously had a lot of success in his career, is definitely tied in with the state, and can help Baylor kind of in an area that at times they struggled the last couple of years.
Do you think Notre Dame's lost some guys, obviously, in the offensive line, and they felt comfortable, with the guys that they have? Do you think that they'll get aggressive maybe in the spring window, especially when they figure out if it's C.J. Carr or Steve Angeli who's probably leading that quarterback race?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame is more selective when it comes to the portal for the most part. I think they only took 8 players this last cycle, and all 8 of them ended up being starters or significant contributors. And that's kind of how they roll. They're going to be a developmental first program. I think what you're seeing the last couple of days is more illustrative of how difficult it is to keep quality depth in this era. They obviously, a couple of the guys that left today were legitimate starters, but they have younger players that were pushing them. And when people come back healthy, that lineup would look a little different. So I think you're seeing that stress being put on even a program like Notre Dame with the tradition they have, a really successful NIL program. It's just challenging to keep your depth in place. And yeah, I mean, I could maybe see Notre Dame adding an offensive lineman in the spring, add to that room. I could see them maybe taking a defensive tackle in addition to what they have. But they have a really strong transfer class as it is, including somebody in Malachi Fields at receiver from Virginia. I think is one of the steals of the portal cycle. So they've quietly done good work over there.
Chris, Ohio State tackle George Fitzpatrick signs with K-State. So another nice dude that enters the Big 12. You say he's the highest rated offensive lineman available in the portal. How good is he?
Well, he's only played, I think he played 66 snaps this year, so we'll find out. Kansas State needs him to be very good based on what they're paying him. But yeah, I mean, he's somebody with a lot of upside. They lost their right tackle to Oregon this transfer cycle. It was a pretty big, not Oregon, I'm sorry. They lost their right tackle to, I think maybe Washington, one of the West Coast schools. So they had to make a replacement there. They had to get better at tackle, and George Fitzpatrick was one of the last big chess pieces on the board. So it's a really nice addition for the Wildcats. And that's a team that really, like, Kansas State lost a lot in the portal this year. I think they lost like 24 scholarship transfers or something like that. So they had to get more aggressive, and they certainly did it so with George Fitzpatrick.
Chris, how much of a splash do you feel like Texas Tech has made? Obviously a splash there near the top of the rankings when it comes to the transfer portal. I know there was the murmurs about them getting involved in Carson Beck for like that 24-hour period. But they've made a lot of noise here, haven't they, early on?
Yeah, so the Carson Beck stuff with Texas Tech was inaccurate. It just wasn't going to happen, didn't happen. I don't know why they got lumped in there. Maybe it's because of the way they've been spending. But I mean, in terms of a splash, it's a cannonball size splash. They have really attacked the transfer portal. They spent a lot of money in the transfer portal. I think if I was going to like slot the Big 12 going into next year, I think they're a pretty clear favorite based on what they did in the transfer portal. So they had a window in terms of the merging of rev share and NIL. And the available funds. And I think they took really nice advantage of it. Did they overpay for a couple guys? Maybe, but like you can afford to right now. And they got a lot of really good players. So that roster is significantly improved. And I think what did Tech go this year? Like 8-4 anyway. Like they were a couple defensive stops away from the Big 12 championship. So that roster doesn't have too far to go.
So I saw this post from Matt Zenitz, and you reposted it. But do you ever type something like this, or do we have to sometimes stop and go, wait a minute, what did I just type? And I read it. Old Dominion center Mike Flores is committed to Louisville. His agents, blah, blah, and blah, blah, tell Chris Hummer and me. Do you sometimes have to check yourself because of the fact you say his agents?
A year ago, yes. Now, no. It's just part of the landscape at this point. Players have representation and they play a role in the reporting process. So I think schools have gotten used to it. I think as a reporter, had to get used to it. We were not the first to kind of push that element of reporting, but once one person does it, you kind of have to jump in line. So it's a different universe, but given the power imbalance between players and schools for a very long time, it makes sense for players to have representation in this era. And I think the ones that have good representation are benefiting from it.
Question I have for you, and we all have sources, or we all have our way about going about doing our job. How much of your information comes from your text messages? How much of it either you sending out or vice versa checking, or even from players or their reps, or watching just the portal itself as it develops online?
I mean, I have a network of sources, and I like to think I can go in different places for what's needed.
Right.
So it just depends on the day and I guess the question that needs to be answered, I suppose. But yeah, you have to lean on a lot of people this time of year, for sure. A lot of text messages, a lot of phone calls, not a lot of emails, I guess. I can't think of the last time I emailed with a source, but phone certainly stays busy.
Can Carson Beck or will Carson Beck have the same impact that Cam Ward did at Miami? Or is their roster a little bit, I mean, there's no Martinez, no Fletcher, no Sam Brown, no Restrepo, no Arroyo, offensive lineman gone. Is that maybe not the same situation that Cam Ward's stepping into?
I mean, I think Cam Ward's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, if not the number 2 pick, depending on like how you see Travis Hunter. So no, I don't anticipate Carson Beck having that kind of impact. I don't think he comes with quite that level of ceiling, but he's a very good player, and Miami had to get a guy. So they certainly filled that hole there. I think Miami will have one of the best offensive lines in college football next year. And given the way they operate, I have no doubt they will find a skill player or two in the spring portal window to add to their roster now that they have a quarterback in place. Although it is interesting that Carson Beck won't throw a football really until the summer. So that'll be interesting from a chemistry standpoint. But given the veteran nature of him and given Shannon Dawson's success, really basically every stop he's been at, like, I'm pretty confident they'll have an above average offense. I think if Miami wants to reach a higher ceiling next year, it's going to depend a lot more on the defense being better than the offense. You're going to have to see significant improvement on the other side of the ball.
Now that the season is officially over, it's never over because of what you do covering the portal, and not just that, but covering college football. Do you have a time that you take a deep breath for a weekend, or can you afford to do that right now?
I think it's slowed down maybe a tad the last day, maybe last couple days. But no, not a lot of time to breathe in this industry. And I'm sure it's the same for y'all. I mean, spring ball's not too far away. And I mean, I'm not covering basketball like a lot of people are, but like plenty to do. And the portal really won't be done for another week or so. The coaching carousel cycle won't be done until mid-February, late February. And by that time, spring practice is already underway. And then you have spring practice, then you have the second portal window, and that's going to take you into June. And then you get maybe a month, and then it's media days already. So it's definitely a 12-month affair in college football these days.
All right, man. Good luck doing it. Appreciate that, Chris. Chris Hummer with us, 247 Sports, CBS Sports, on the transfers that those announced today. Those are in the portal today, and also an overview of those and what they've done, at least up until this particular time. I talked to a college football coach by text. I guess it was more Tuesday evening about, I don't know how they do it. Now, I know more and more football programs have more and more people like personnel, general managers, NIL people. Like at Baylor, David Kay used to be a media relations guy for men's basketball, and then, of course, took over media relations for a while until the transition with Brent Ingram, who looks over the entire group. And I don't know how they keep up with it. And the staffs are bigger, larger, deeper, whatever, but it is amazing. And then you have the story. And then and what I mean by that, it's not even keeping up with who's available or not, or who's leaving or not. It's hard enough to deal with 16 or 18-year-old, 20-year-old kids. And now, with all of the things involved, it just seems like to me, I'm not sure I would walk away from it. I'd be challenged by it. I'd love that, like hit it head on. But the personalities and all of the drama or the backs and forth of stories to me would be just really, like, can you go to bed? I wonder what's his name's doing tonight. Or not because they're out in trouble, but he's taking a trip to Iowa or somewhere like that. It is really amazing how they try to at least, I guess, keep all this within reach of an understanding what's happening with all the changes in the rosters going on. All right, when we come back, Craig Smoak off the radar. Matt Brown, extra points today at just after 5 o'clock. We'll also today hear from Mickey Spagnola on the Cowboys coaching search, and is it getting closer to an end? And Paul's top 5, and this is 365 Sports. Marco's Pizza. I did not know exactly when they came into the United States, but it was founded in Oregon, Ohio, just outside of Toledo, and there since 1978, bringing over the Italian historical, traditional pizza that they brought with them. Marco's Pizza, the fastest growing pizza brand in America. Waco has 5 locations wherever you might be. Maybe it's Salt Lake City, I don't know. Maybe it's in Toledo, as I just mentioned, I don't know. Or possibly New Orleans. But you have a Marco's Pizza close by, and if not, there's going to be one here pretty soon because of how fast they are growing. Cut slices, not corners. They have pizza that you can, of course, like anyone else, make yourself based on what you order online, or tell them when you call them up if you want an order delivered, or you're going to pick it up on the way home or at any time when you want pizza. I enjoy their pizzas. The pepperoni and Italian sausage Magnifico is loaded with what those two products bring to the table, those ingredients. Marco's Pizza. Bob Mock, the owner here locally, Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at alliancebanktexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine now has 2 locations to serve you. The original on Lakeshore Drive in North 19th Street and the brand new spot in downtown Waco at 600 Franklin Avenue. If you're looking for the best in craft beers or local Texas bourbons, then the original is the place to be. And for the latest trends and online phenomenons, head downtown to the Franklin location. Either way, you're going to get the same great variety, customer service, and speedy experience. Check out both locations on their Facebook and Instagram pages. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive in North 19th Street, and now downtown on Franklin Avenue.
This is Craig Smoak's Off the Radar, presented by Alliance Bank. They take pride in making banking easy. AllianceBankTexas.com.
Welcome into Off the Radar here on 365 Sports. Tuesdays and Thursdays at around 4:45, taking a look at various stories that are going on around the world of pro and college athletics. And we'll start off with a little bit of Cowboys news because I know we're going to talk about it with Mickey, but we were talking earlier at the start of the show about the report from Clarence Hill of, I believe, what is he, All Dallas now? Is that the way you pronounce it? Huh?
DLLS.
That's how you call it?
Yep. I had Joe Hoyt on the show last week, and DLLS.
Like it's a radio station or something?
Yeah.
Like DLLS 106.7 FM.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, from DLLS, Clarence Hill Jr. reporting that the Cowboys were working on terms and closing in on a deal with Brian Schottenheimer to make him their new head coach, moving from the OC title and an assistant role the past 3 years into the head chair to replace Micah McCarthy. He said in that report that the two sides are expected to, quote, cross the finish line today or no later than Friday. So there was that, but there's also another report out there that came from Shireen Williams, who I don't think you can get closer than Shireen and Clarence without being married, basically. Those two have worked alongside each other for a very long time, but she just put out there in the last few minutes or so that while Brian Schottenheimer might be negotiating to become the Cowboys' 10th head coach of all time, there is a report out there from Nick Harris of the Star-Telegram where those two, where Clarence was at one point in time. I think Nick replaced him actually at the Star-Telegram. But the report says that Jones has spoken with former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll regarding the opening in what was described as an informal conversation, although the interest is legitimate enough to be reported, but that there was no formal plans or no plans for a formal interview. So that was at least thrown out there. I'm not exactly quite sure, other than to maybe just throw water on the Schottenheimer thing's a 100% done deal. So just in case they pivot, like, hey, Pete Carroll's also interested. But in reading that, it doesn't seem like there's too much taking the smoke away or extinguishing the flames of Brian Schottenheimer. But hey, does it make you feel any better, Paul, that they kind of sort of informally talked to Pete Carroll about the job?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
No.
I didn't expect so.
I mean, I'd rather have Pete Carroll than Brian Schottenheimer, but Pete Carroll would also likely keep Brian Schottenheimer because he's in the Pete Carroll tree, which is fine. It just...
Is there a younger-looking 74-year-old man in America?
No, you a little jealous?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, every time somebody says Pete Carroll's 74, I'm like,
yeah.
74 what?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
That's from living in California for a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was put out there by Pro Football Talk today, just to say, I guess, to let Cowboys fans know, like, hey, they talked to Pete Carroll, but it does not in any way debunk the report that they are closing in on Brian Schottenheimer. So if there's a curveball, there was your throw right there, was the Pete Carroll thing. But unless that massively changes things for some reason or another, it does look like the Cowboys have their guy, and we'll hear that in probably the next 24 to 48 hours or so. So there is that. Meanwhile, college football national championship game decided on Monday night as Ohio State beat Notre Dame for their 8th national championship, and the ratings are in, and more than 22 million people watched the national championship game on Monday night. 22.1 million, according to ESPN's PR wing. It was their most watched, or it was the most watched non-NFL sporting event over the past year. Its highest peak was 26.1 million viewers, so it average-wise came out about 4 million less than the peak, but 22.1 million. That peak came in a little 15-minute window between 7:30, 7:45, probably when the game was still a little bit interesting. Obviously, it faded there in the second half, especially early on in that second half and late in the first half. But down from last year, Michigan and Washington had 25 million viewers, so about 3 million more for that game a year ago. Also had a peak of 28 million viewers, so their high spot hit about 2 million more viewers in their window at its highest rate. But they also played a week earlier, so I don't know how much that comes into play or not, but that was the most watched last year's national championship game in about 4 or 5 years. So that was a high mark since 2020. Now back down again. And still better than the 2021 game. That was the worst watch. That had less than 20 million viewers. But, yeah, 22 million on average for Ohio State Notre Dame. I think you're happy with that if you're ESPN. As I said, most watched non-NFL sporting event of the year. So there you go with that. Not sure what expectations might have been, but 22+ million.
They're not paying for 22 million, though. That's a good number. I'm not saying because you just gave the numbers, but I think that they may say they're happy with it, but I wonder if down deeper they're disappointed it didn't hit that 25 plus.
Yeah, or that it didn't go up because it was the first year of a new thing. But that's my question about it. But again, people have to take time to get used to something. They have to adjust to it. And also, like we've talked about ad nauseum this week, the calendar just has to change. You had the last football games before it were both two really good NFL games that everyone was talking about. So there are a lot of football fans who might have had to be reminded that, like, oh, by the way, Ohio State and Notre Dame are playing for the actual title this week. So the more they can get away from that, if they can somehow get the NFL to agree when they at least get to the championship game to let them play that on Saturday and the NFL doesn't have to play multiple games on Saturday, that could be something. But I guess – we'll see if that happens.
I asked Sam Kahn about this. Do you want me to read a couple of things he said? He, as a lot of people have said, it's too late in the calendar, and people are not used to it yet. He mentioned that the MLK inauguration had a little bit to do with it, maybe distracted some people. Just a theory, but I do wonder if some of the novelty of these teams has worn off after 3 rounds of postseason play. 20 years ago, when fans tuned into the national championship game, maybe they hadn't seen the two teams who were playing, and now that there's almost a little bit of fatigue factor in even the bigger boy brands that are playing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. There's a variety of factors that could play into it. Again, it was a week later than normal. I'll tell you what, I don't give a damn what the TV rating was for the College Football National Championship. I just wanted to see an entertaining game. If it's 10 million, that doesn't change my fandom. If it's 45 million, it doesn't change my fandom.
That's a good point.
I think there's way too many people obsessed with TV ratings, and I'll say, as I say every time, I bring it up because I do think it's interesting, it's fun fodder, and I know it can matter for folks who take it a little bit deeper into comparisons with conferences and things like that and bigger picture stuff. But yeah, I don't care if ESPN's happy with it or not. That's what I'm trying to say. But it was a nice enough number, over 22 million. Although looking at the last few years, you had 22.1 for this year. I mentioned 25.1 last year, which is the first time they'd been over 25 million in about 5 years. And you had Michigan as a part of it. Yeah, the new blood in Washington. So that was something a little bit newer there. The lowest watched, I mentioned it, I think I might have said 2021, though. It was the 2021 season. But the 2022 national championship game, Georgia-TCU, we know what happened there. It was a complete annihilation.
Yeah.
17.2 million. So that was 5 million less than this year's. And that was the lowest in college football playoffs short history. 22-6 in 2021 for Georgia, Alabama, and then the COVID year, 2020, you had Bama and Ohio State, which it doesn't get any bigger than that. They had 18.7 million. So that was COVID year, probably a lot of lack of interest. But 22 won the third biggest number in the last 4 years, and certainly right there in the range of, the top 3 or 4 of the last 5 to 6 years. So it's a little bit of a decline, but I think a more entertaining game would have probably brought more eyeballs. So 22.1 the average for the college football playoff national championship game. And look, if that does freak people out, I'm sure we'll hear about it, and then we'll hear why that led to 6 automatic berths for the Big Ten or something because the ratings weren't good enough. But that's still pretty good. 22 million people is not not like the Everybody Loves Raymond rerun or something like that. That's pretty damn good. And again, biggest sporting event outside of the NFL.
Yeah. It is. Like, people can freak out about these things, but the World Series is the comp I'll say is that, the World Series, whether it's Texas and Arizona or the Dodgers and the Rangers, Fox hasn't stopped paying for it. I mean, they're I'm sure they go into some meetings and go, okay, well, we didn't get the kind of number we did a year ago, but we were in this ballpark. As long as they're within the landing zone, I guess, of what they want expectation-wise on any kind of sports investment, they're going to keep paying for it.
Well, someone's going to always pay for it, and you're as good as what 2 people think you are, or so one person, right?
There's only one thing that would happen for them to get rid of something, and that would be catastrophically low ratings, which actually happened to the NHL right after they had that long work stoppage. ESPN got rid of it for a while. Like, when the contract was up, they're like, yeah, no, we'll see where it goes, because people, especially in the lower 48, realized they didn't care as much about hockey until it got going again, and then they came back to ESPN. So outside of something like that happening, nobody's getting rid of anything.
Do you think, and this is another note, do you think that enough of the Sam brought this up, the access of telling stories about those who the players are is, like, Game Day does a good job with that, but that's one show. Fox maybe 2. Do we hear enough and know enough about the players until the championship game that we can cling on to maybe some of the stories?
Well, I think there's 2 parts to that. I think one is it's hard to cling on to anybody when they're moving around constantly. And that's part of people not having as much of a investment. If you're a K-State fan, you had an investment in Will Howard, and then he leaves. Are you sitting there rooting him on for Ohio State? Maybe you are, but I bet you a lot of people weren't. I bet you a lot of people didn't even care to watch it because they knew they were about to watch Will Howard win a national championship. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of the moving around has made it difficult. And then even honestly, if you were to do a big profile on some guy, but you're halfway through, you're like, oh, wow, what a journey. And then you find out he's been on 3 schools, and now he's at the biggest school possible, and he's making $1 million. Are you really emotionally attached to this guy the same way if it was he lost his mother and all that, but then it's he's on his 4th school, and it's just, I think it's harder to wrap your arms around these guys. To his point, very much so. It's very much harder.
I think it does in a similar way for a long time, and I don't know if college basketball's ever fully recovered from it, but I do think that the one and dones hurt college basketball a little bit because, when I was a kid in the 90s, you could watch that same Duke team, that same Kentucky team, the same UNLV team, that same Arkansas team that kind of ran up against each other in the postseason for a couple years. Michigan, the story of the Fab Five is so cool. When you watch that 30 for 30, because they lost to Duke multiple times. They had multiple times where those 5 guys together as a team, succeeded and failed, right? So that we all saw it. Now, I mean, everything's just a 1 year.
Michigan also was a team either you loved them or you hated them.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying
you
is
need some of that sometimes.
Yeah, but the continuity. Yeah, and you loved them or you hated them because you knew those guys. You knew the guys. Now everything in sports, every team in sports is a 1-season television show. It's just a 1-season television show, and the next season is a different thing altogether. And I think that does hurt it a little bit because, again, you don't if you're not a fan of that team specifically, if I'm a fan of Ohio State, I don't care who they get, that helps me win the national title. But if I'm a fan of just, say, Boston College and I love college football, am I going to be really locked into, this guy is, from here and here and here? Maybe not. I may not have as much passion for it.
Yeah, so I think some of the roster turnover makes it harder to really invest and kind of grow with guys maybe the way you used to. I also think the lead-in sucked. There's a whole weekend of the NFL, and they're like, surprise, here's the national championship game. Welcome back to work this week. Hey, by the way, once you're done with your Monday, national championship game. You haven't heard a thing about it the last 2 days because the NFL's taken over and taken 24/7 news coverage of sports in America. So, yeah, I think the lead-in just kind of sucks. But we also know that they're not going to turn it to Friday because Friday's not historically a good viewing number. So it does come back to the networks. It does come back to the TV viewers, and Monday is the best day to try to get as many as possible, but it's still dropped this year. You can attribute that to longer playoff, later start, lack of investment, Monday nights, whatever you want to, but still 22+ million on average for the national title game. And, we'll see kind of where that goes over the coming years and if that's kind of the new norm or different teams create different results moving forward. But there you go with that. So the last broadcast of the year, 22.1 million on average. Meanwhile, a couple of game times have been announced for next year, believe it or not, already. And kind of crazy we're already at that point, but here we are, and now my computer wants to go wonky every single time.
Mine does that at 5 o'clock almost daily.
Here we go. So we were talking about North Carolina, their first game against TCU. If you weren't aware, that's who they would be playing first out of the gates. Has been moved to Monday, September the 1st. It'll be a 6:30 Central kickoff on ESPN. So Bill Belichick and his North Carolina Tar Heels against TCU on a Monday night. That'll be a nice little spot for Sonny Dykes and company to maybe make a little bit of noise there at the beginning of the season. And then also Notre Dame and Miami will be the day prior. That has been announced as 6:30 kickoff on ABC there on Sunday, August the 31st. So Notre Dame, Miami, Sunday night, August 31st. North Carolina, TCU, Belichick's debut, Monday night, September 1st, back-to-back days. And we'll obviously hear a lot more of those times trickling out over the coming months. But there's two good games to start counting down and looking forward to.
I can't wait for Notre Dame and Miami. Get the Catholics versus the convict shirts selling again. That'd be awesome. So I don't know. Here's the thing that's kind of sad about current Miami, though. They're not really convicts anymore. They got nice.
I don't know, man. When I think of just hardened, just bad dudes. I mean, Carson Beck, man. Have you seen that guy? What a bad hombre that guy is.
He's got a tattoo.
A lot of tattoos.
I know.
I'd be shaking in my boots.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Another team, though, with that team you're talking about with Miami, though, you loved him or you hated him.
Can you imagine seeing him in a dark alley and then he busts out his phone and does a TikTok dance in front of you? You know how scary that would be?
Yeah, that'd be nuts. One of the scariest dudes in the history of the world is Warren Sapp. Just on the football field, just in general. Have you ever seen him in person? He's just this really big dude. He looks like he's a little off.
He looks mean. Larry Allen looked mean.
Yeah.
Larry Allen looked like he was going to murder you when you saw him.
And was the nicest,
his natural
gentlest
face.
person.
And this guy didn't play for Miami. Kevin Green looked. We met him. One time.
He's a pro wrestling figure
at the Super Bowl. But
really.
I remember one time Kevin Green.
I said he looked like a pro wrestling figure.
Yeah, but Kevin Green had this look about him that was just mean. And when we met him, he was nice. I was like, this is weird. It's it's kind of like meeting Ben Affleck and be like, oh, you're not Batman. That's not how it felt. But yeah, so I guess it doesn't have the Catholics versus the convicts anymore to it. And that's fine. I'm glad for Miami that they don't have to deal with those kind of off the field things that they did before. But they used to be pretty damn scary.
Yeah. So you'll have Catholics, convicts, or however you want to market that there on a Sunday, and then UNC TCU on a Monday. So that's how we'll partially get our college football season started later on this year, so it's cool just to kind of see some of that start to trickle out a little bit. And I thought you said he was a major pro wrestling figure, and that's why I said not really, because he was a blip on the radar. He had a moment. He had a couple matches, and he was good for what he did and the time period and all of that. When he was still in the NFL, he had a nice little crossover. But, yeah, he definitely looked the part, and And it was just a blip, though. It wasn't a major role. That's what I thought you were saying.
Plus, he grabbed the coach, and so he had a little bit of that flare up, and people thought he was a bad guy. But he looked the part. I never even realized he was a part of it.
You know, the nicest person I've ever met in the NFL is Mean Joe Green.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like really, really genteel and nice and calm. And I know that he wasn't always that way, but when he put the helmet on, you know.
Well, yeah, it's again, Larry Allen is a gentle giant, passed away, but when he put the helmet on and went out to play football, he was a beast.
Like
an angry young man.
For example, Nate Newton, was a big dude. He was an excellent, badass offensive lineman, but he always looked funny to me.
Yeah.
I mean, because he is funny. I mean, he was never, but you look at Larry Allen, Eric Williams was like that too. I mean,
no, I spent a lot more time around them than you did.
Yeah,
I think.
but
Eric Williams scared the shit out of me. Whenever I had to interview him, and it wasn't like I requested him very often.
Tyron Smith scared me initially because he's got this real serious look in his face, but he's also one of those that's just really just nice. So.
We'll close it out with this Baseball Hall of Fame. We mentioned this at the end of yesterday's show, but 3 new inductees. Ichiro Suzuki gets 99.7% of the vote. Just a single voter did not vote for him. CC Sabathia, 86.8% of the vote. And Billy Wagner, 82.5% of the vote. Those are your 3 newest Hall of Famers. And in the case of Rivera, in the case of the unanimous vote or lack thereof for Ichiro Suzuki, it was brought up quite a bit yesterday that the last guy to get the unanimous vote was Mariano Rivera. And I'm sorry, I'm very jaded towards the baseball voters. I don't like them. I don't like the anonymity. I understand why there probably is some, because some dummy in Kentucky or something might track down a guy because he didn't vote for his play. I get that, but I also think it's complete cowardice to be the only guy to not vote for a no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famer. I feel like you should have to explain yourself. I really do, or at least put your name out there. I know it's not life or death, but I do feel like there's got to be some law and order to you justifying having a vote. And if you're going to be the only guy or gal, I don't know, who doesn't vote for the most no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famer, I feel like there should be something attached to that, because you are affecting history. You are affecting a lot of things. Yeah. You're not affecting whether they get in or not, but you're making it about yourself. You're making this about yourself and not what this person went out and did for 20 years and earned, and I think that's bullshit. So Ichiro did say in an interview that he did that he would that he was very happy to be a Hall of Famer. He said, I was able to receive many votes from the writers. I'm grateful for them, but there was one writer that I wasn't able to get a vote from. I would like to invite him over to my house, and we'll have a drink together, and we'll have a good chat.
Good for him.
So that was Ichiro talking about whoever that one voter is, which I don't know if that's been even tracked down or not, but I do think it's totally cowardly. I really do. I think there's no way you do that if you're not doing it anonymously or doing it for attention, for that matter. And I really hate that. I know it's not that big of a deal. He's getting in, and one vote doesn't change that. But it is funny in a twisted way, don't get me wrong, but that Mariano Rivera is the last guy. Do you see what happened? He and his wife are now being accused, and it's an accusation, it's a lawsuit, in potentially covering up some sexual abuse claims against children. And it was just the timing of it was just so odd, because here's Mariano Rivera's name in the news yesterday, and it's like, he's the last unanimous Ichiro and all that. And then that story drops today of he and his wife, Clara, being accused in a lawsuit of covering up a child sex abuse claim. So her attorney for the family said the allegations are completely false. And there's details about the story itself. It was a young girl, apparently was a member of their church in New York. And if you care to read about that more, then you can. But I couldn't help but to sit there and think of I wonder if that voter, they voted for Mariano Rivera clearly, but the fact that if there was an agenda, like a Yankees agenda or a whatever agenda,
Ichiro
I don't know.
was a Yankee though.
He was, but if there was some type of a thing there, here's the last guy who was perfect, and here he is in this awful lawsuit that just dropped today. So it was just very strange timing, but congratulations to that class. Any thoughts on those 3 guys and them being inducted now.
I think all three of them are Hall of Famers. I think CeCe Sabathia was a guy who swung balance of power, certainly in the NL Central when he was there, and then as he moved to the Yankees, he certainly helped them a lot. I saw him pitch in person several times. I always enjoyed it. Billy Wagner was a dog, and Ichiro was one of the best hitters you'll ever get to see. Here's what Ichiro said, though, when asked about that one rider. And more people should be like Ichiro. There's one rider that I wasn't able to get a vote from. I would like to invite him over to my house, and we'll have a drink together, and we'll have a good chat.
Just said that.
Oh, you just said that? I missed it. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Okay. I missed that.
I was like,
that ran. So,
I thought I was the old
I'm getting there.
blind and can't hear.
I'm sitting here looking at it the whole time, and you said it, and I'm like, yeah. I was like, I can't wait till
so
he's
what
done.
did he say?
No,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he said he'd invite the guy over for a drink, and I don't know if it was passive aggressive or not in his tone, but probably Ichiro probably really does mean that, and have a glass of water, tea, whatever, and good for him. But he's in, and I do hope they unmask the lone voter. I do.
I thought,
just so there's some
that
accountability.
person has said something.
Have they?
No, it was
okay.
That was somebody who was trying to get attention.
Okay, well, that's what you do by not voting for him, is trying to get attention.
Which leads to what, honestly, though? Like, do you get 50 cents from Twitter for the interactions you got?
No, he has a podcast.
Okay, well,
that
guarantees I would never listen to that. I guarantees I will never, ever listen to that.
Yeah.
Whoever that was. So, yeah, anyways, there's a few things off the radar.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that. Coming up, Matt Brown has been a busy young man. AFCA convention, he talks about a lot of things when it comes to college athletics. He was at the AFCA convention. He was at the national championship. What has he learned about the revolving changes in news and rules and regulations in college sports? From Extra Points, he's next. This is 365 Sports.
Start something new with Alan Samuels in Waco. Get the new 2025 Jeep Compass for just $25,995, or the 2025 Dodge Hornet GT for only $28,995. How about 20% off on 2024 Jeep Gladiators, or 2.9% for 72 months, and a 2024 Jeep Wagoneer Series 2, and get a dealer discount of $11,000 plus 3.9% for 72 months. Alan Samuels in Waco, your friend in the car business.
Come by. Let's be friends.
Automatic Chef is your local vending, office coffee, and micro market provider, delivering outstanding service to break rooms all over Central Texas for over 50 years. Automatic Chef brings the best products to your location at the best prices. With hundreds of choices in fresh food, coffee, snacks, and drinks, let Automatic Chef tailor a break room solution to your needs. Make break time great again with Automatic Chef. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchef.com.
Don's Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. Don's Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
Want to send a message to the show? Jump in the Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue chat room.
I get that newsletter, and if you don't, you should, from Matt Brown, Extra Points. There are 3 packets of stuff, and I mean stuff in a good way, that I've received from Matt Brown. He's been all over the place. It's theory of how to build a championship football roster. So what do college football players actually want? And then also what he was like to cover the championship game in the weekend. Matt, we haven't had you on in a while. You've been incredibly busy. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for your time. So what was it like? Because I know initially you were wondering if you were going to cover the championship game, and eventually people went to bat for you, which they shouldn't have to do. Congratulations on getting in.
I really appreciate that. It was, I think, a humbling couple of days to realize that there were people that were willing to go to bat for me without being asked. I don't begrudge anybody at the College Football Playoff for initially declining to credential me. They've got a lot of people throughout the country that want to get into this game. I understand it. I'm glad it all worked out. And it's going to be an experience that I remember forever. I was a little concerned leading into the game, honestly, that it wouldn't be that great of an environment because, as I'm sure you guys saw, it was like $3,000 to get into the stadium. the demand for tickets was insane. And often when you have that kind of thing happening in an NFL stadium, the crowd becomes pretty corporate. It's not the actual diehard fans. I don't know if it's because both the Ohio State and Notre Dame fan bases are clinically insane. Both of them, you could probably have benefited from some therapy leading into this game. So there was so much anxiety. I don't know if it was a function of the stadium itself or the number of students that were in there, but I really thought it was a high energy, high intensity building, a really good football game outside of maybe 5 minutes leading into the third quarter, and an experience that I'm going to remember for a long time. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time too. Sometimes you don't let yourself really enjoy the moment, but there was a quiet minute when it's 2:00 in the morning. Everyone's left the stadium. It's just me on the field with a bunch of confetti and realizing like this sure beats breaking rocks for a living, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Do you have any ideas on shortening the calendar that would work?
It's a really good question, right? And I've tried to read some of the thought pieces about this because I understand the concern that we get a little bit of college football fatigue this late in January. You're kind of we're all trained, if you're somebody of a certain age, for the season ending shortly after January 1st. The only solution I can think of that would really help the television side is the NFL agreeing to actually be cooperative rather than adversarial through this process. You don't want to have your big games going up against the NFL. And the limitations in the Sports Broadcasting Act right now break the kind of Saturday monopoly that the college football's had for a minute. So we have games that are kicking off on Thursdays and Fridays. We have a championship game late on a Monday night in the Eastern time zone when a lot of people have gone to bed. I don't know how you could squeeze everything else in without it being more unsafe or about starting the season way earlier. But hopefully there's a way to work with the NFL to get these games into maybe some better television windows than they were this year.
Matt, what is the kind of story coming out of that game for you? Is it this resurgence of Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman and how close they came? Is it Ryan Day's redemption, Ohio State's NIL payroll? Like, kind of where was your head coming out of that in terms of just seeing it all unfold?
Yeah, I really don't think it's the payroll. And I wrote a story about that. We could talk about that in more detail here if you want.
Sure.
But I do think how people perceive Ryan Day after these last couple of weeks is super fascinating. I think it's a little bit of an overgeneralization or oversimplification to say that Ohio State fans were frustrated with Day because Ohio State struggled with Michigan the last 4 years. That's definitely part of it. But the Buckeyes also, if we're being totally honest, did not meet expectations this whole regular season. They had lost 2 consecutive games to Oregon. They kind of farted around, even in some of their wins with Penn State. The offense was never anywhere close to as consistent or dynamic as it was expected to be over the year. And that's a reflection of the insanely high expectations that this team has, which were not unjustifiable given that, you were starting like 9 seniors on defense and you have the highest 247 roster composite rankings in the country. So now Day has won, Ohio State's beat 5 top 5 teams over the course of that season. It's one of the best strengths of schedules ever. Won big game after big game, and most of them were not close. Like their mantra was to leave no doubt. I think that's really what happened. The closest comparison I can really think of would have been like how Miami fans felt about Larry Coker. Larry Coker won a title, if I remember.
Mm-hmm.
But there was kind of a sense like, is this guy just a caretaker? Is he really the engine behind this program? And eventually he gets in the Hall of Fame. It's a very strange thing to have a guy that is unquestionably one of the very best that he does, or what he does in college football history, to say nothing of what actively doing it in the country. And yet a lot of fans, even now, I think, are like, I didn't really enjoy it that much, Like how people reconcile that, it will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, because at Miami, and I'm not a Miami fan, but just remembering when they came on in the early 80s, Snellenberger will always be a godlike figure because he's the one that was there when they made the surge and beat Nebraska. Jimmy Johnson, of course, because he's brash, and then even Dennis Erickson. But Larry Coker, probably in some cases, people forget he was also one that won it all.
Exactly right. And from what I remember from reading Bruce Feldman's book and from, I did some research around this era for my book, you would find, ex-Miami players or Miami fans that come back and I'm like, this team doesn't have the same swagger. The leadership's not coming from the head coach. This was a guy that is more of a caretaker rather than someone to take it to the next level. Certainly not the same personality as a guy like Schnelly or Johnson. But that's not necessarily bad. At the end of the day, you win 92% of your games, coached a bunch of Hall of Famers, and got a natty. If that's the worst case scenario, I think you're doing pretty good. I wonder what the attitude out of Columbus will be 3 or 4 months from now as they kind of as more good news kind of comes in from Michigan and Penn State and Oregon, because Penn State's going through a very similar thing right now with James Franklin.
Do you think of the teams in the playoffs, who are the ones that will take this and take it in advance next year? Who will build on it? Is it? I mean, Penn State's got a lot of guys coming back, and James Franklin has that, like you just said, the same kind of thing, but to a much more severe degree than Ryan Day ever has. I don't think there's people in Columbus, like you mentioned, that quite realize how bad it is for the folks in Happy Valley when it comes to those big games. But who's the ones who can take it, come back, build on it, get around or so further?
I do like both Notre Dame and Penn State there. And I wrote about this a little bit this week, and I'll be interested to hear maybe what you fellas think. But my theory here is in a world where rosters turn over pretty significantly and pretty quickly from year to year with the transfer portal and everything, that there is a meaningful advantage over a 16-game season to having a really, really experienced team. Lots of seniors, lots of redshirt juniors, lots of guys that have played a lot of college football. And if you can return those rosters, just like how we say in college basketball that coaches and GMs want to get old and stay old, and maybe you have a couple of freshmen or underclassmen, but you really want to build them around guys that have played college basketball together. I suspect that's going to be more of the model that works here. And then I think if you look at Notre Dame and Penn State, who are projected to return pretty significant chunks of their teams from this year, they'd be in that great spot. This was something that kind of came up from talking to players and the post-game press conferences at the championship game. Ohio State had to lean a lot on their depth, on their player-driven leadership, and on their ability to regulate their emotions, knowing it's a super long season. You can't go 160% balls to the wall every single week if you're playing an NFL schedule, which is now what you have to do if you want to win a national championship game. So those two might not be the most talented teams next year, but I suspect there really is going to be some advantage of being able to come back and say, I know who my linemen are going to be. My tailbacks, my tight ends have been in these big moments before. We're going to be okay.
All right, so what do college football players actually want besides a lot of shoes and money and whatever they can if they want to move on and transfer portal? But break it down with this story, because I'm intrigued by this.
Sure. So on Saturday, before the championship game, there was another event elsewhere in Atlanta with athletes.org, which is an advocacy group that's trying to organize football players. They had this meeting with, I think, about 50 players. I saw Diego Pablo there. You had guys from North Carolina, a couple people from Baylor, a couple people from UNC, but importantly, lots and lots of different schools. And the idea was not for them to come out and say that we've created a union, but for those players to talk about elements of their experience with each other and begin the organizing process. And that's what kind of stuck out to me, because what the players were telling us is they don't really talk about this stuff a lot with people outside of their own locker rooms. You're going to find that there's not complete agreement about what players want out of the transfer portal. A lot of the athletes that we spoke to at that meeting said, hey, we don't think 10 days in January is enough time, because lots of players get pushed into the portal from their coaches, or we might call that processed. And you need more than a week to figure out a new situation if that's not the world that you were expecting to be in. They're going to have different opinions about things like employee status, about who should shoulder the responsibility for long-term health care, or about regulations regarding when you can practice or how you can practice and how much control that a coach has over your life. We also heard from some players that are like, we don't actually love how transient college football is now, because if you're a quarterback, you want to know if your linemen are going to be there next year, or the guys that you're throwing passes to. It takes a long time to build up that chemistry. And if 2/3 of your roster grabs an NIL bag and transfers, your own experience gets worse. What I think my biggest takeaway was that a lot of current athletes don't know, and they want to talk to each other, and they want to have a voice in this process. It's pretty easy for guys like you and I to call up a coach or an AD or a lawyer and ask them what they think. It's not every day we get to hear what Sawyer thinks, you know?
Matt Brown, again, Extra Points with us on 365 Sports. Of the constant changes, there's that, what do you call it, the NCAA deal that is supposed to be done in April, and yet there's more changes, and then the junior college thing popped up. Matt, where are we going to be when April ends?
Man, I'll tell you, brother, if I knew exactly, this would be a way more expensive newsletter because ADs call me. And I'm like, this is probably not a great sign if I have a better idea about what might happen than you. But the very frustrating thing, I know for everyone, whether you're people like us or a fan or a coach or a suit or anything else, is that so much of this now is not driven by anybody at the coaches convention, anybody in the NCAA. It's driven by lawyers. It's driven by judges who may or may not understand college sports or care that much about it at all. I think it is more likely than not, just from talking to attorneys and industry people, that the House settlement is approved in April. But I definitely don't think it's 100%. There are some significant and meaningful opposition to that settlement, whether that's from many Big 12 athletes who are walk-ons and don't want to lose their roster spots immediately, whether that's other advocacy groups who are concerned that the $20.4 million number is another arbitrary salary cap that wasn't negotiated, whether it's some ambulance chasers who don't really have any particularly noble big picture goal other than to grab some more cash. And that's part of how our legal system here works too. The only important thing is that anybody involved in this world has to have plan A, B, C, D, E, and F, because you just can't control what judges or Charlie Baker is going to do, and you just have to be ready to pivot whenever you get the email from Indianapolis.
Matt, I'm curious how you – and I covered the Dallas Cowboys for years, and I'm a Cowboys fan, and I always wondered how I'd react trying to be professional, in that sense. But I don't really have to worry about it because Jerry Jones exists. But you covered your alma mater in a professional sense while they were winning a national championship. What was the inner workings of Matt Brown during that game?
I have to be completely honest. Covering one of those events in person is such a chaotic and busy experience that for most of the game, and certainly right afterwards, I was too busy to really to soak in this moment. There was a time early in the third quarter when Ohio State's win expectancy was 98%, and I was like, oh, this is actually happening. I wonder how I'm going to feel about it. But then at the moment, you're so focused on, you get down to the field level and there's a gajillion people running around. I'm like, am I in the right place to go take this picture? Am I going to miss this press conference? What's happening over here? And you're hopped up on adrenaline. I really didn't feel anything, honestly, until 2:15 in the morning after I had filed a story, after I had done all the interviews, and could kind of just stand there on the field and take this moment in. The one thing, though, that I did experience, which sometimes I take for granted, I think maybe some of us might take for granted who are listening here, is that even though college football players are 6'3", 260 pounds, can do the 40-yard dash in 4.2 seconds, they're 20 years old. And one of the things that you see on the field after a gigantic win is you see college football players celebrate like college students. You can hear them cracking dumb jokes. You see them hugging. You see them crying. You see them just releasing all of this relief from this bundled up season in a way that I think is different from somebody who's a grown man who's 32 and been playing in the NFL for 9 years. And that kind of seeing that so viscerally when you're 2 feet away, I think is important for having more empathy as we cover the sport, because I understand people that are like, look, man, these aren't amateurs anymore. A lot of these guys are making more money than I am, and I don't want to. I want to treat them accordingly, and I understand that. And that, yes, they may very well be making more money than you, but they are still 20. Mm-hmm. They still don't have the completely developed prefrontal cortex, right? There's still age appropriate behavior going on, and I think it's just a good thing to have that in the back of your mind whenever you're mad at something any of these guys may or may not do. And my experience at that stadium helped remind me of that.
Paul texted me and said you jumped in front of Ryan Day when Molly McGrath was trying to interview him, and I just thought that was a little bit much. I thought that was
Matt, you and I, I think Smokey was gone that day, but the last time we had you on might have been we were talking about how the theory of Ryan Day going, maybe being the Colts offensive coordinator would be a fun gig if they lost to Tennessee. And that could not have been more wrong.
No, I legitimately thought Ohio State was going to get dog walked by Tennessee. I thought Tennessee was going to win by 17. Yeah, and think of the vibes, right? You've got Ball Nation with 35% of the stands in Columbus. Ohio State's reeling after one of the most embarrassing and heartbreaking losses in program history. And the Vultures rout, and they just beat the crap out of them. And I think it might be interesting to see what happens with Day after this, because look, the guy's admitting I had to get private security on my house after we lost to Michigan. People are screaming at my children at the grocery store. It's a high pressure gig, and he's still relatively young, and he's rich, and he knows ball. And if he decided hypothetically in a year or two, I think I'd rather just go to the NFL where I can lose 4 games a year and make people and nobody complains. And I wouldn't blame him in the least, right? That's what Paul Brown did. Ohio State is not an easy place to coach, and that's why people almost always leave that job against their will. There's no indication of that now. I mean, I think he would be within his rights to start knocking on random doors in Columbus and say, demand an apology, including from me. Next time I talk to him, if he wants to tell me where to stick it where the sun don't shine, that's part of the gig. He's earned that. He's earned that right. It's just hard. The Cowboys example is not too far off, I think, in terms of just all the attention.
Great stuff, Matt. I saw where you picked up Sam Weber as a part of your umbrella. Is that correct? He was with Open Doors?
He was, yeah. We brought in a PR and marketing executive here. Hey, Estella. To help take the load off me so I could focus a little bit more on writing and reporting. We've got 4 full-time employees now, and we're really excited about where this year could be going for Extra Points.
Have fun, man. Good to see you. Go be your dad.
Right.
Go be a father.
Okay,
there you go. Matt Brown.
I'll go be a dad.
It's been a while. Great to have him. He just cranks out material. It's unbelievable. And it just sometimes it's like, oh, my God, I don't have time to read it. But I always look in for a nugget or two, if at all possible. When we come back, the Cowboys – Schottenheimer, is all of a sudden Pete Carroll in play? Yes.
Just going to let you finish that and add something to it.
Go ahead.
Well, there's just one move in the NFL. Liam Cohen, the Buccaneers, looked like he was going to stick with Tampa Bay. Now looking like he may be going to Jacksonville to become their head coach. So
they fired the GM.
Yeah, they get rid of Trent Baalke, and Liam Cohen, who wasn't, I guess, interested, is now interested and says, according to multiple reports, on the verge of becoming the Jaguars' head coach. There's another name to go ahead and just check off, our team to check off.
I brought that up, I think, yesterday when Baalke was fired, that will that now change Cohen's mind, and apparently, yes, it did.
He got a big raise from the Bucs. Whether he decides to, leave or not, he's going to be making more money.
So is that official, Craig?
No, nothing official. It's just that it started dropping while we were talking to Matt there from various accounts. So that's just something that sort of started to come across. Ian Rappaport, plot twist, Bucs OC Liam Cohen speaking with Jags in person for their head coach jobs. Key candidate to be the coach in Jacksonville per me and Tom Pelissero. Days after agreeing to a massive extension in Tampa, he may find a head coach job he could not refuse. So how bad are you if you're Trent Baalke? Like 24 hours later, it's like, no, now I'll coach there. But before, when this guy was there, like, no, not interested. But, yeah, I think saving face a little bit if you're Shad Khan, if you're able to pull this off, because you were a bit of a laughingstock yesterday with your late firing, so maybe you're reversing course.
When we come back, Mickey Spagnola, DallasCowboys.com. This is 365 Sports. Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco, Butcher Shop and Bakery. Pork, poultry, beef, and seafood. Lobster tank with big dudes, man. Inside that lobster tank, fresh lobster tails. They will, of course, take care of that for you. And if you want, cut the beef, the steak, or whatever you need exactly how you want. Sometimes when I've gone in there And I've gone in there to get a couple of knickknacks or so because they have a lot of that as far as seasonings and marinades and even canned goods if you want, pasta, bread from the bakery. I'll see tiger shrimp in there. I love bacon-wrapped shrimp. It sometimes can be a little bit tedious, but you get the larger pieces of shrimp. That makes it easier. Devein it if it's not already that way, and then put bacon around it. I love the taste of it. But the tiger shrimp with bacon around it is what I make for my brothers and sister-in-law when I go to Florida and cook on the grill down below their beautiful condominium. And it's just delicious. And so they have that tiger shrimp occasionally inside their butcher shop. Seafood, pork, poultry, and beef, fresh baked goods every day, from kolaches to bread, sweets and treats, cold beer and wine. The Bauer family, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
How did Edward Jones become one of the biggest financial service companies in the world? By not acting that way. Financial strategies, one-on-one advice, it's a big difference. And that's why Brad Wilson, your Edward Jones financial advisor, makes sense of investing. Experience the difference for yourself. Brad Wilson, 250 Sharon Drive in Woodway, 254-776-4337. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Ready to take your business to the next level? Carrion Solutions has got you covered. We deliver world-class IT consulting, including Quest On Demand and Migration Manager, M365 and Exchange migrations, Active Directory assessments, security hardening, and Windows Server upgrades. Our experts specialize in consulting, monitoring, support, and managed IT services. We promise vision, professionalism, and unbeatable value. Satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not happy, we make it right. Remember the name Carrion Solutions. For more info, email sales@carrionsolutions.com or visit carrionsolutions.com. That's CARRION solutions.com. Carrion Solutions IT success guaranteed.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Brad Wilson. Investing is time and experience back to you and your money during today's changing times. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Sometimes Mickey and I don't want to admit how long we've known each other, but the early 90s is how long we've known each other when the Cowboys started going to training camp in Austin. And you would be stunned at how many times when I've had Mickey on the show with us, Paul, Craig, or even back in the day when a big story would break. And I was hoping he would deliver that with us today, but he did not. He failed us. Failed us. All right, Mickey, what is true? Is Brian Schottenheimer the leading contender? Were they ever on the cusp of naming him? And has Pete Carroll become maybe a part of this discussion?
I think all of that. And by the way, I just entered your studio.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, on the TV part? We can't flip it over, though, can we? Can we do it?
Oh, you
can't?
Right.
Oh, now we can.
Yeah,
oh,
Garrett,
my goodness.
Garrett says he can.
All right, let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens. I'll keep him on the phone.
Yeah,
there we go. Okay, all right. He's
hang
hung
up on the phone now.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
All right.
Well done. Well done.
Now we don't have volume, though.
Yeah, well, you can't hear us?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
We can't win.
See what happens when two old men are on the screen at the same time?
I'm in the show, but I have no volume. Let's see.
Okay.
And unmute.
Mic check,
now,
3, 2, 1. Mic check.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Give me
we
a
can.
thumbs up. Yeah, I can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay, let me call him right back.
Back to the phone.
Guess you'll have to call me.
Mickey's going to have to hang up his typewriter and put the 8-track tape machine away, along with his record player. All
right, there we go. He's back on the phone.
All right, back with us. All right, so yes to all of the Schottenheimer, the leading candidate. Were they close to making that decision today, and or is now Pete Carroll in the mix?
Well, I think it ends up being a little bit of both, because if Pete Carroll's in the mix, now he's a defensive guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been following along anything I've been writing, it's like, well, if it's a defensive guy, then when he comes in for the interview, my first question is, who's your offensive coordinator? Well, I think they're trying to maybe hook something up where if they can convince Carroll to be the head coach, then Schottenheimer can be the real offensive coordinator. And remember, they worked before in Seattle together. So maybe it's a possibility. I don't know.
Can you compare this to another coaching search? Is it more like Wade Phillips or maybe the Chan Gailey time, or is every Cowboys search its own unique thing?
Okay, so let's make sure we get the facts right about both of those, all right? Because I've heard on talk radio getting both wrong. So after they fired Switzer and needed a new head coach, Jerry thought he had Terry Donahue in line to be the head coach. But he told Terry Donahue that if you're the head coach, I also want you to be the offensive coordinator. You got to call plays. And he balked at that at the last minute. And it's like, no, I'd just rather be the walk-around head coach. And Jerry would have none of it. So Donahue backed out, and now they were, I want to say, the Super Bowl maybe already started, and they didn't have a head coach. And so that's when they got recommendations that this guy that's the offensive coordinator at Pittsburgh would be a good choice. And he hired Chan Gailey, and mostly because he wanted him to coordinate the offense. So that's how Chan Gailey got hired and why that search kind of got confusing. And then with Wade Phillips, and this is the part everybody forgets. Jason Garrett was the quarterback coach for Nick Saban for 2 years in Miami. He had a 3-year contract. He was still under contract with the Dolphins, even though Saban left. Let's see. He left that time to go to Alabama, I think, if I got it right. Mm-hmm. So everybody's calling Huizinga, the owner of the Dolphins, asking for permission to talk to Garrett to be their offensive coordinator. Scott Linehan, who was the offensive coordinator with Saban in Miami, got the head coaching job with the Rams. He wanted to bring Jason Garrett along to become his offensive coordinator, and Huizinga denied the permission. He was also getting calls from several other NFL teams and college teams to hire Jason Garrett, and he denied the permission. And then when Jerry called and said, hey, we'd like to talk to him, he said, and this was early in the week, he said, you've got till Thursday to decide if you're hiring him or not. And so he doesn't have a head coach yet, but he had a deadline to bring Garrett on in some form or fashion. So by Thursday, they hired Jason for a how did they describe it? It was a non-designated position on the coaching staff because he didn't want to lose Jason Garrett, and Jason Garrett wanted to come back to the Cowboys. And then I think it was a good week later, and then they hired Wade Phillips, and he had no problems with taking on Jason in some undetermined role. And then he became the offensive coordinator. So let's make sure we got all those stories right for the people that were probably in diapers back then when it all took place.
I want to bring something up about Pete Carroll, if you don't mind, Paul. The historical thing about Pete Carroll, if in fact that this happens, there are 3 modern-day coaches who have won both a championship game in college football and a Super Bowl, and the other 2 have coached the Cowboys, and Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, and that would then end up also with Pete Carroll being a part of the mix.
That's a good one, David. So I'm sure the downside to Pete Carroll is, what is he, 72, 73?
74.
But he hasn't been out for but a year, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like he got used to the good life and maybe forgot how hard he needed to work. Now, if I remember correctly, the Raiders are trying to also interview him or try to hire him, so it's not a slam dunk. But again, he's a guy kind of, been in charge, knows how to be in charge. If he's got the offensive coordinator he worked with in Seattle for, I want to say 3 or 4 years, and one of those years, Russell Wilson had one of his best seasons. So they had success together. And then I think the other caveat in this whole thing is that they would like to bring on Jason Witten in some form, some capacity on the coaching staff. And I'm thinking, if I'm Pete Carroll, I'm not signing a 5-year deal. I want to do it for a couple years and then, move on. So you would have to accept that, I think. You guys, every day it's like the wind blowing here. Something new kind of crops up. But I don't think they're close to making a final decision just yet.
Mickey,
and let me add this before you ask the next question. At this point, who would you hire to be your head coach?
I really have no idea.
Who, me?
Right?
Yeah.
I'm one of the few in America that would have just given Mike McCarthy another year if, in fact, both could agree on what they both wanted.
Well, they couldn't agree on the length of term. I think McCarthy wanted 5, and I don't know if the Cowboys wanted 2 and an option 3. And his agent was pushing for a longer term.
Okay, all right.
And his agent is the same agent as Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. And you saw the contracts those guys signed, right?
Yep.
Averaged $18 million a year and $16 million a year, and for 5 years. So we'll see if McCarthy overplayed his hand, because they wanted to bring him back. But again, when you look out there for a head coach, everybody's excited about these offensive and defensive coordinators getting hired. But again, if it's a defensive coordinator getting hired as the head coach, then who's your offensive coordinator? Because that's the most important thing here. You didn't just move on from your head coach. You moved on from the offensive coordinator too.
Mickey, how much do you expect the coaching hire to be based on the guys that are on the roster now that are going to be there? Obviously, that's important because – when they hired Bill Parcells, that was obviously a philosophical shake-up as it went to – they went from a 4-3 to a 3-4 or –
Not immediately, though. Not immediately.
But, there was a transition. But that was – they knew when they hired him that was coming, right? That they would transition once the personnel changed.
He hired him in 2003, and it didn't happen until 2005.
Yeah.
And by the way, his defensive coordinator – was Mike Zimmer.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2003, when they went to the playoffs with maybe the greatest coaching job Bill Parcells ever did, turning around a team that won 3 consecutive 5-11 seasons and had Quincy Carter as the quarterback and Troy Hambrick as the running back, and they went 10-6 into the playoffs. And guess what? Zimmer had the number 1 ranked defense in the National Football League.
So Do you expect them to look at somebody who'd be willing to make a philosophical shift on the field? Obviously, if it's Brian Schottenheimer, they're going to get a lot of the same that they've had, and there's not for whatever reason, for better or for worse. And again, I have no idea, who I would hire at this point. But do you think that that's more or less on the table?
Well, from a personnel standpoint, I think from an offensive standpoint, you'd probably not want Dak to have a third different offensive system in 5 years. You probably want to keep things close to the same. Now, defensively, your personnel, I don't know that they've got 3-4 personnel because they ain't got three guys, big old guys that are going to be up there in the front, right?
Yeah.
But then they don't have enough linebackers either. So, yeah, I don't know that that's a stipulation. But again, I think if you're a coach, you don't come in here and say, well, this is what I do. You better look at the personnel you have and say, okay, this is what they can do. And I think that Mike Zimmer, was a 4-3 guy. And I think his regret, if you caught his quotes at the end of the year in his last coordinator press conference, he said he wishes he would have installed his type of defense because he was worried that he didn't want to change everything because they had been pretty successful the year before. And then as the season went along, he made some different changes in how they ran the defense. And all of a sudden the defense started playing well the second half of the season. So he said, if I had one regret, he goes, I was too easy on them to start. I wasn't my normal self, and I should have done what I wanted to do from the beginning.
Wasn't the story that he wanted to get to a 3-4 eventually, and he didn't like that win? He wasn't big enough, and then he fell in love with that win?
You're talking about Parcells.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because he was used to those big old linebackers he had with the Giants, right?
And Banks
and then
them, yeah.
And then he realized that, and you remember his quote about that win. He goes, "That's a football playing dude there."
Yep.
But they eventually, in 2005, when they had the 2 first-round picks and they got DeMarcus Ware and Marcus Spears, they felt like then they had the personnel to move to a 3-4, and that's how the transition came around.
Mickey Spagnola, DallasCowboys.com with us on 365 Sports. The Cowboys in search of a replacement for Mike McCarthy. Mickey, I'm going to ask you this question. Don't shoot me, but so today's Thursday, tomorrow's Friday. You don't do anything on a Friday because nobody ever listens on a Friday unless it's bad news. The games are going to get the games really from Saturday afternoon through the game Sunday, through the aftermath of who's going to the Super Bowl gets all the attention. And then there's a little bubble between then and the Super Bowl week. I'm not sure if the NFL still has that. We don't want anyone being hired during Super Bowl week. So this will happen when? Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday next week?
I think for those of us that are looking for a reason why this hasn't happened yet, and I think we've thought of that, but I think that can't be a consideration. Once it gets knocked out, it gets knocked out, right? And you're not worrying about the visibility. Because I got a feeling whatever they do, they're going to get criticized, right? I mean, they're getting criticized in the search. So I can't imagine everybody's going to change their mind, right? Last night, when it looked like, they're doing the interviews with, and here's what happens. Okay, they're interviewing Schottenheimer. What are they interviewing him for, right? Because his contract's up. So were they interviewing to see if he was willing to stay and be the offensive coordinator? Because they wanted John Fossil to stay to be the special teams coordinator and were willing to give him an extended contract, and he decided to go to Tennessee. So maybe they were recruiting Schottenheimer not as the head coach, but as a coordinator. And as the other guys that they were interviewing, they were both defensive guys. Do you think maybe they were picking their brain on if they were willing to be defensive coordinators if I hire a head coach that's an offensive guy? See, we get confused because it's great to have a head coach, but you better have some good coordinators. And Dan Campbell better get to work, right? Because his coordinators were pretty darn good, and they both got hired. Now he's the head coach. He's not a defensive guy, and he's not an offensive guy. So what's he going to do? So putting a staff together sometimes takes precedence on more things than people understand.
Mickey, thank you. Good luck having that. You won't sleep. I know you because I know how it is to cover the Cowboys, and now with a head coaching change. And thanks for your time. We appreciate it, young man. Have a great weekend.
Right. And David, I had just told somebody I'm always scared to check my email because I'm thinking they're going to tell me I got to get over there for a press conference in a minute.
There
right?
you go. Yep.
So maybe I can sleep tightly for a day.
From the Spagnola Castle. Is that still in Flower Mound?
What's that?
Where your residence? I know it used to be in that area, right? Where are you now? Carrollton?
It was in Carrollton.
Carrollton.
It was in
yeah.
Carrollton.
Yeah, that's right.
But now, we moved almost to Oklahoma.
Gainesville?
No, we're not that far north.
Prosper with Dion right next to you?
But when people started coming out here, they said, "Are you in Oklahoma?" I said, "No, we haven't even crossed Louisville Lake yet."
Oh, that's not even Missouri. All right, thank you very much, Mickey Spagnola, DallasCowboys.com. I want to use this. I know we're up against the top 5. This is Jerome Tang. Baylor beating K-State in a game that was a grind for both teams. VJ Edgecombe was freaking amazing. 30 points, and really gave this team something when they just basically said, everybody clear the hell out and let VJ get to the rim. And then after the game, Jerome Tang, disappointed, K-State's in a free fall, not good at all. His thoughts about what Scott Drew did following the win.
The results is not what we wanted, but I see a group that's continuing to get better and that's not giving up. And Coach Drew came in the locker room and, he told the guys, just keep fighting, keep believing. And he told them about the time we started the conference 2-8, and everybody had given up on us. And then we finished the conference 9-9, won 3 games in the Big 12 tournament, and went to the Sweet 16. Beat Creighton in the second round when they were, I think, a 3 seed or a 2 seed or something, and that Doug McDermott. And just like this thing can turn. You just have to keep believing, keep fighting, and we're healthy, right? We're healthy physically, and I feel like we're healthy mentally. And
that's Jerome Tang. Scott Drew said, and he didn't ask Scott to do that. Scott went over there. I'll never forget when you see teams like when Stephen F. Austin, and I hate the fact that we didn't actually bring it up on the show that Kyle Keller's out there, had a win at Cameron Indoor, and Coach K walked into their locker to talk to the team. You'll hear those stories. It happens maybe not a lot, but it happens enough, and that was a story that Jerome Tang shared last night at the postgame. That was a neat win, a very much needed win for Baylor, and Kansas State right now is really, really struggling. A lot of heat on Jerome Tang, who we all love as a friend.
They spent a lot of money in the portal, and one of those guys is not even with the team. Coleman Hawkins got a bunch of money, and he's scoring less than 10 points a game most nights. So those parts all just don't fit together the way that I think that they thought they would. And Coach Tang, he's been a little cagey, a little edgy, which is not his style. That's not him. So wish the best for him, and I hope that they get right. But yeah, this is what happens though when big money's on the line.
Yep, the portal can kill you. The portal can also launch you into a lot of good things. Had that great first year, but it's been kind of slowly. Baylor had to win because of the loss Sunday at home to TCU. Now they go to Utah, and then also have BYU on their schedule coming up. All right, when we come back in a moment, Paul Catalina and his top 5.
Check out my go-to polo from Flag and Anthem. It's everything you want in a golf polo, but you can wear it at a dinner, to a barbecue, whatever your plans are. It's extremely soft, super comfortable. Check it out, flagandanthem.com.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
That's far. So much forgiveness. Wait, did you say forgiveness like far? Or forgiveness like forgiveness? Forgiveness. 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 I'm hearing far. Forgiveness. Like forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness. I'm still hearing far, but whatever.
Introducing Stealth 2 with more carbon for more forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Just hit it.
Get ready for epic savings at Best Buy. Right now, you can save up to $700 on select Alienware and Dell gaming products. Perfect for leveling up your gaming experience. Plus, grab the latest Android Google Pixel at an unbeatable price. Don't miss these incredible deals. Shop now at bestbuy.com and upgrade your tech today.
For Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome into Paul Catalina's Top 5. I've been told since I bought these podiums that I need to use them, and they'll keep me from wildly gesticulating. So I've gone from fun Italian to possible Mussolini Italian. But we'll see. We'll see with that. I hope it doesn't end up that way. But the trains will run on time. Of course, we're brought to you by Texas Beef House. Go to TexasBeefHouse.com or BetOnBeef.com. Use our promo code 365sports. For the next few of these, maybe the next 7, the last 2 of this week and the next 5 of this week, we're going to be going through the postseason, all-new Paul Catalina's Top 5 That Dude Awards. And if you're wondering what qualifies you to be that dude, if you have to ask, you're not that dude. So let's first start with our leader of dudes. Eventually. There we go. Kenny Dillingham, this year's leader of dudes, of that dude. So he's that dude who's the leader of dudes. No coach in the country took a program from absolute nothingness to near the mountaintop, and they were this close to being in the semifinals. This close a couple times against Texas. In fact, probably should have been in that game, all things being equal. But Kenny Dillingham, right now, step aside, Lincoln Riley, the best quarterbacks coach in the country. The best quarterbacks coach in the country. And I can give you his roster of Bo Nix and Jordan Travis and now Sam Levitt. Any quarterback who wants to get better, play for this dude. Kenny Dillingham, leader of dudes. Moving on. Number 4, the special teams dude. Ricky White from UNLV. Sorry about, ignore this E, that's a typo.
That's a typo. I'm just going to keep my finger on it right now while we talk about a guy who blocked 4 punts this year. And so you can still see it in that angle, Garrett. So anyway, there's an E in Vegas, so it's fine. It's fine. But Ricky White, really good wide receiver. There's him blocking a punt. He does that almost as much as he does catch touchdowns. He's good at both of them. Ricky White, a guy who's going to be an NFL player and a very good one. We had Eric Galco on the show on Wednesday talking about it, and he is someone that every team will need. A jackknife, a jack of all trades, whatever you want to call him. Swiss Army knife, he can do it all. He can help you in the passing game, and he can especially help you on special teams. And he finds his way back to the punter quite a bit. Number 3, the wide receiver you didn't know you need, dude, Nick Nash. Now, this is more of a yard after catch guy, a first down machine, a former quarterback from San Jose State. A ton of receptions, a Biletnikoff finalist this year. Again, an NFL player because he's a receptions machine. He moves the chains. Is he Luther Burden? Is he Ted McMillan? Is he Emeka Ibuka? No. He is not. But you need guys like this to move the sticks. He's a stick mover, and he's just learning how to be a wide receiver. The best is yet to come for San Jose State's Nick Nash in the NFL. I promise you that. And if that's not true, then my name isn't Paul Catalina. Number 2, the dude who is up for anything. You could make a case for a lot of guys to be the MVP of Ohio State. Jeremiah Smith, the super freshman, and he might be the freshman dude. He's probably going to be the freshman dude. But I'll put that off in case you might forget in the next couple of days. Maybe it's Will Howard. Maybe it's one of the running backs, Judkins or Henderson. I would venture to guess that if you asked Ryan Day who's up for anything, team first attitude, saved their season more than anyone, it is Donovan Jackson. He played tackle, he played guard. He played the other side of the tackle and the guard. He moved around wherever they needed him to move. And here's the thing. He's their best offensive lineman. Usually you leave your best offensive lineman in the spot that he's the best. But no, they moved him around because he could be the best at any of those spots. Donovan Jackson, absolutely one of the unsung heroes of the Ohio State National Championship season. They should retire his jersey because they had a lot of injuries on the offensive line at key points during the season, and whatever happened, Donovan Jackson moved around the line or made the guy playing next to him on either side better. That's how good Donovan Jackson is. Number 1, the dude you can't kill, Riley Leonard. Now look, he might not be my quarterback dude. That's to be determined in the next few dude lists, but no matter what happens with this guy, and you saw it in the national championship game, down 24 points, he's in for it. Tough game, tight, back and forth, he's in for it. Hurt a little bit, in for it. 3rd and 7, nobody's open, got to scramble through a defense and fight your way to the first down, in for it. That is why Notre Dame took such a jump this year. Riley Leonard is a dude you can't kill. No matter what it is, he's like Jason Voorhees, man. He just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And I know Jason Voorhees is bad, but that's the best example I could think of. You think you got him, you think you got him, you think you got him. You're breathing easy. He fell off the cliff. No, guess what? He was hanging on the whole time. He's just waiting for you to get calm, and then he's going to strike. That's Riley Leonard. And also very opposite because he seems like a very, very nice man. Good kid, nice kid. Not Jason Voorhees at all. But when he gets out on the football field, you cannot stop him. He just keeps going. And it is... I think it's unfortunate for Notre Dame they didn't get 2 years of him, and it's unfortunate for Duke that they didn't get another year of him. That's how much I'm a big fan of Riley Leonard. He played for Duke and Notre Dame, 2 schools that are constant, at least second-tier rivals of Florida State. I love this guy. I can't get enough of him. I don't know what his football career lies ahead for him, but I'm a Riley Leonard fan for life. That's going to do it for this edition of the Top 5. That's going to do it for the show. As soon as Smokey lets us out of class.
Thank you, Paul, very much. Barry Crawford, Scattaboo, not on the list, is an outrage.
Somebody didn't pay attention to the beginning because this is going to go on for a little while.
There you go.
So
Barry Crawford, you are on the clock, sir.
Hey, Barry, you're here. You're here. I need you to hear.
That's what I'm saying about the chat room. They need to pay attention to the show, and I got them to do that for a couple of segments.
Yeah. Well,
Avery
congratulations.
Winter is working on 365 Sports tonight. An hour of what we do today will be there at 10:30 tonight on the CW. Garrett Ross weaving in and out of the show. Also, intern Andrew, Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak. We appreciate you every day, every second you give us. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe before we say goodnight, please do. We'll be back again tomorrow at 3. I'm David Smoak. For everyone I've mentioned, including our great sponsors, thank you and good night.